Chapter 507. Lu Feng could vaguely feel his body starting to fade away. He could feel his soul fading away. He could feel the imprint of his existence slowly disappearing. This seemed to be a kind of heaven-defying erasure. It was a kind of complete erasure. However, in the face of this, Lu Feng didn't show any signs of shock. He didn't feel that kind of madness or despair. There was only a faint blankness in his eyes. There was only a kind of endless freedom. Perhaps I'm too egotistical at times. I'm too confident at times. Ever since I started my career, I have gone crazy again and again. My blood is boiling, my crazy shouts, and when I face hundreds of millions of people, I always enter the craziest realm. But, is that really me? Lu Feng was at a loss. Gradually, all of his past experiences started to appear in his mind. It was as if all of his experiences were being replayed in his mind. I remember that I used to be an ordinary person who couldn't cultivate. However, I never gave up. Back then, I suffered many setbacks and was disappointed countless times. In the past year, although I have suffered many hardships and experienced unprecedented life and death situations, in the end, I have walked through them and entered new realms one after another. However, is this the real me? There was a slight tremor in his eyes. In the past I didn't succeed, but I was incomparably calm. Now I have never failed, but I have always been crazy. Which one is the real me? Lu Feng was at a loss. At this moment, he was really suffering. He took a deep breath. In the next moment, Lu Feng's eyes finally closed completely. He knew that he had already reached the final moment. Dad, Mom, I am sorry. I have failed in the end. I, your son, have failed. I love you. I really, really love you. In his mind, Lu Feng seemed to see his parents' smiles again. He saw their endless thoughtfulness and warm care. She saw her childhood room, her parents playing with her childhood bedside, her parents' joy, her former school, and her parents' expectations. There was a bitter smile at the corner of his mouth. Eternal, my brother, I'm sorry. We can't fulfill the promise we made back then. Teacher, I'm sorry. Your student has disappointed you. I didn't even become a god-tier master before I fell to the ground. Senior 2 Tianxian. I'm sorry. I've wasted so much of your time and effort. I've disappointed you. Her repeated apologies made Lu Feng's heart tremble and his eyes moistened slightly. Finally, slowly, Lu Feng thought of her and her. Xuyen. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. Mu Xuyen was Lu Feng's girlfriend. She was one of the people that Lu Feng loved the most. She was one of the people Lu Feng loved the most after he became an adult. To her, Lu Feng could only say, sorry. I'm sorry. There's someone else in my heart. I'm sorry. I can't fulfill my promise and stay by your side. And Qingran, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Yu Qingran was Lu Feng's only love when he was young. To her, the only thing Lu Feng could say and do was to apologize. I'm sorry, I forgot my promise. I'm sorry, there's someone else by my side now. Lu Feng's eyes were tightly shut. Gradually, his body started to fade into nothingness. He actually became completely transparent. It seemed like he would really disappear in the next moment. Gradually, Lu Feng smiled. There was a trace of a smile in his closed eyes. This kind of obliteration is really not bad. At least, the people that I love, the people that I protect, the people that I hope to be happy, can forget me. I'm sorry, Qingran. In the end, I didn't fulfill my promise. In the end, I can't save you. The voice no longer existed, because at this moment, Lu Feng's body was completely illusory, and finally disappeared completely. In the final moment, only his soul was left, which was gradually fading away. In the end, Lu Feng still came to this place again, and he finally entered the space of his consciousness. Lu Feng looked at the sky-piercing Futu in front of him. He didn't do anything. He just walked in front of the sky-piercing Futu and sat down quietly. Looking at the mysterious sky-piercing Futu, Lu Feng's soul was about to be annihilated. Countless vicissitudes flashed through his eyes. I know. You changed my fate. But I can't be sure if all of this is just a coincidence or a kind of fate. Lu Feng used to think that everything was an accident. He knew that if it hadn't been for the sky-piercing Fudu, his life would have been ordinary. His bloodline would never have awakened. However, the sky-piercing Fudu appeared and broke his shackles. It changed his fate and even awakened the bloodline that the ancestors of the Lu family thought couldn't be awakened. Lu Feng thought that it was an existence that surpassed fate. It was the sky-piercing Fudu's existence that changed his mediocre life. But now, Lu Feng didn't know if that was the truth. When my soul first awakened, I was in my teacher Dao Songtian's inner world. I saw it. Perhaps even teacher Dao Songtian doesn't know. In fact, I saw everything. Because at that moment the Supreme Emperor was me, Lu Feng. Billions of gods as my body, countless immortals and demons as my bones, time and space as my eyes, fate as my soul, so great, so great. But is that me? Is that the real me? Is it me, Lu Feng? Lu Feng was at a loss. He knew that the one who could cause such a shocking phenomenon was an existence that had never been seen before. But was that person, that emperor, really him, Lu Feng? The immortal king has appeared. His grace is unparalleled, his power is unparalleled. I know that his strength is unparalleled in this generation of the universe. The most powerful monster in this era, other than Lu Feng, was nothing more than the Heavenly King. Even if there were more terrifying kings, they wouldn't be much stronger than the Heavenly King. But even the Heavenly King was far from being comparable to the Immortal King. The difference between the two was too great. After all, the Immortal King was the king of taboo. But he said that I am the theme of this era. A long time ago this was destined. I, Lu Feng, am destined to be the king of this era. Is that me? Is that me? If all of this is destined, then my so-called transcendence of fate, my so-called control of fate is a complete joke. I have always been controlled by fate. When the Devil King appeared, he said that regardless of whether it was him or the Immortal King, they were all restricted to a certain extent, making it impossible for their strength to erupt to the extreme in the early stages. They say that the existence of my limit is actually a kind of peak. This is destined and can never be changed. The Devil King's words were still vivid in his mind, causing Lu Feng's heart to tremble continuously. In the next moment, he seemed to have used up the last of his strength. In this endless illusory soul body, Lu Feng erupted with unprecedented excitement. I, Lu Feng, am actually controlled by fate in the end. I used to think that I was no longer in fate, that I was an existence that transcended all control, but now I understand that all of this was arranged. It was controlled. Even your appearance was arranged by fate. Even a great existence like you had to follow the arrangement of fate and appear at this time, right? Am I right? Tong Tian Futu in his eyes, a glimmer of light finally appeared. Lu Feng stood up and slowly walked towards the Tong Tian Futu. As he walked, the existence of his soul became almost undetectable, almost completely disappearing. However, Lu Feng was still walking. Finally, even though his soul was about to disappear, he still came to the Tong Tian Futu's side. A dazzling smile appeared on his face, which had faded to the extreme. Lu Feng stretched out his arm. In the next moment, his hand slowly reached for the Tong Tian Futu. However, at the last moment Lu Feng stopped. Looking at the Tong Tian Futu, an indescribable color appeared in Lu Feng's eyes, which were about to disappear. Are you warning me? Are you warning me that I can't touch your body? Are you warning me that if I touch you now, I will die? Lu Feng muttered with a smile. When he stretched out his arm to touch the Tong Tian Futu, he felt a warning from the bottom of his heart. It was a threat that came from the bottom of his heart. Lu Feng knew that if he touched it, he would die in an instant and turn into ashes. I was originally going to die. I was originally going to be completely obliterated. What's the point of my persistence? This time, let me be presumptuous. For the last time, let's do it vigorously and magnificently. My fate doesn't want to be controlled by anyone. No matter who you are, you can't control me. His arm finally made contact with the sky stupa. At that moment, the sky stupa started shaking violently. At that moment, countless rays of light flashed and an endless amount of energy burst forth from it. This kind of power was indescribable. At the last moment, Lu Feng even felt that this power contained the supreme power of the Age of Annihilation. However, this feeling only lasted for a moment because in the next moment, his soul body completely disappeared. He didn't know if it was because his time was up or because he was completely annihilated by this terrifying power. Lu Feng, even his soul body, had completely disappeared. What's going on? In an empty space, a young and elegant figure suddenly stood up. His eyes were filled with disbelief. The withering of fate and the rupture of space-time. How is this possible? The fate of this era has actually been changed. Who exactly is it that has such a shocking method? The Overlord of this era? Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Even the Overlord of this era doesn't have such power. Could it be that the human monarch didn't die and changed everything? That's also impossible. This is absolutely impossible. Monarchs are the descendants of the human monarch. Even if the human monarch is still alive, he shouldn't have killed him, ruptured space-time, and changed fate. The young man was going crazy. He could sense that this era was truly in chaos. He could clearly see the pattern of fate that had appeared earlier. It was a vision of a monarch dominating the heavens, and a host of monarchs rising up to devour the eternal king. This fate had no result because the result had yet to appear. However, at this moment, before the monarchs could even touch the eternal monarch had disappeared? Has the monarch fallen? This man was an unparalleled man. He was the immortal king. Impossible. The existence of the monarch is the theme of this era. No one can replace him. I can die, the demon king can die, the saint king can die, and the divine king can die. But only the monarch can't die. But why did the monarch fall when we didn't do anything? The universe was in turmoil. Countless ancient peak existences felt the chaos of fate and the rupture of the era. These existences couldn't believe what they were feeling. In the absence of a supreme being of the universe, some existences had actually interfered with the era of the universe. This was undoubtedly unbelievable and inconceivable. However, everything they felt was telling them that everything was real. Chapter 508. Can he succeed? Alchemist Saint Rong said slowly as he looked at Tu Tianxian, who seemed to be calm but had already revealed a strange expression. Tu Tianxian was silent. In the end, he shook his head gently. I don't know either. He is a person who has entered the Tao. Although it is extremely terrifying to enter the Tao at such a young age, he is only at the starting point because of his own limitations. However, who would have thought that he, who has just entered the Tao, would be able to see the end of the Tao? He actually wants to do something that only those who have reached the end of the Tao would do. He actually wants to transcend fate. Alchemist Saint Rong sighed softly. His eyes were filled with chaos. Endless time and space revolved and fate intertwined. At this moment, he was incomparably noble and eternally great. However, it was a pity that after a moment, all these strange phenomena disappeared. I really can't see the end of his Tao. In the past, I only felt that his future was filled with fog. But now, I really can't feel his future. He really doesn't have a future. Without a future, it meant that he was already dead. This was a theorem. Tu Tianxian still didn't have an overbearing expression. He shook his head gently and said slowly, on the path of cultivation, there are countless checkpoints and countless branches. The Tao is the most difficult path. Since ancient times, other than the legendary 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, Shakyamuni Buddha and the ancestor human king, No other living being has reached the end of the Tao. The 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, without cultivating any power, could be invincible for an era just based on their understanding of the Tao. Even the overlords of an era couldn't harm them. They are great beings who are protected by the universe's origin. However, the human Tao era with the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors disappeared in the end. Just like the most ordinary eras, not even a trace was left behind. This was a great secret of the universe. In the current universe, other than the supreme beings, no other living being knew about it. However, it didn't matter if it was Tu Tianxian or alchemist Saint Rong. They were all at the same level as the Divine King, therefore they knew everything. This is the mystery of an era, a great secret. The 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors had constructed the human Tao epoch. Although the 8 great primogenitors didn't have any strength, they were supreme existences who had reached the end of their path and were protected by the entire universe. Therefore, the 8 of them are actually overlords of an era. Outside of the primordial era of immortals and demons, all the overlords of the next few eras were only comparable to a single human era. The human monarch era was the true first era after the immortal and devil era. It's a pity that they're all dead. The overlord level 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors were annihilated without leaving a single trace. And the truth of all of this is because they wanted to take that final step. Alchemist Saint Rong sighed. That's right. If it weren't for the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors who wanted to transcend their fate and take a step away from the path at the last moment, the origin of the universe wouldn't have abandoned them. In the end, when the great calamity descended, all of them would have died. In ancient legends, the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors were existences that had reached the end of their paths. However, no one knew that they had already taken that step. They were existences that had already left the path of cultivation. They weren't existences who'd entered the Tao, but the Taoless. Apart from the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, only the human monarch has transcended fate. That's why no one can say whether the human monarch is still alive or dead. I'm afraid even the origin of the universe doesn't know. Because the human monarch has already transcended fate. No one can sense his existence. And now, his bloodline descendants have also reached this step and are about to take that step. Tu Tianxian's heart was incomparably conflicted. This step wasn't what he was pursuing. He knew he wasn't qualified to pursue this step. This was something only the overlords of an era could pursue. It was beyond the final realm. It was also the realm of true invincibility. But can he succeed? The 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors succeeded, but they were annihilated in the end. The human monarch succeeded, but there was no news of him after that. Can he succeed? If he succeeds, then all of this, is it good or bad? Whether it was Pil Saint Rong or Tu Tianxian, they didn't expect Lu Feng to reach such a step. It was incomparably strange. In an incomprehensible time and place, he directly transcended fate. This is fate. Lu Feng looked at the figure in front of him, unusually silent. After a long time, the figure smiled. He shook his head gently. I'm not fate. I'm only here to help you transcend fate. Lu Feng nodded gently. He didn't know why, but he believed what the figure said. Perhaps it was because he was exactly the same as him. Then, how can you help me? Didn't I already fail before? I remember that voice said that if I fail, I'll be completely erased. Lu Feng was puzzled. The figure that looked exactly like Lu Feng, was still smiling. Fail? What is failure? Have you really failed? Lu Feng's head slowly lowered. That's right, have I really failed? Have I really failed? The so-called failure is actually the determination in your heart. This time, there is no success or failure at all. Everything is just what you think in your heart. You think you failed. Then you've failed. If you think you've never failed, then you'll never fail. At this moment, Lu Feng slowly came to a realization. Breaking the shackles of fate. What is fate? He had never really seen it before. Until just now, when he touched Tong Tian Fudu, Lu Feng finally had a trace of understanding. He finally felt the existence of fate. In that case, his previous attack was nothing in the face of fate. He didn't even make a move. Then, where did the failure come from? Where did the failure come from? Looking at Lu Feng, the figure that looked exactly like him suddenly smiled. You are Lu Feng, you are Emperor Lu Feng. We are the noblest existence in the endless space and time. In our hearts, there has never been a so-called failure. We will never fail. We have, but we didn't succeed. But our existence can define everything. If what we think is true, then even if we don't succeed, it is still a success. We can change everything, we can dominate everything. Even the theorem of the universe can be changed. We say there is no failure, we define failure as success, then it is a success. Then the theorem of the universe will change, and it will be forced to admit that we have succeeded. At this moment, Lu Feng's heart was trembling. Lu Feng finally understood. He was an emperor. Not those emperors in the mortal world who ruled millions, tens of millions, or billions of lives. He was the strongest and only emperor in the universe since ancient times. What he ruled was fate, the law, the universe, and everything. Since he was in the domain that he ruled, then he was the only theorem. Whatever he did, it was the right decision. How could he fail? This was a true emperor, the definition of a true emperor. I understand, not to mention that he didn't use that killing blow at all, he didn't really face fate at all. Even when he faced fate, he didn't crush it with a single blow. So what should he do? If he said it was a success, then it was a success. This was a true supreme monarch. Looking at the rekindled willpower in Lu Feng's eyes, the figure laughed, laughing incomparably crazily. This appearance was exactly the same as Lu Feng at his peak. Then, what is all this for? Lu Feng was still faintly puzzled. He didn't understand what that voice wanted him to do. Hearing this, the figure fell silent for a moment, then a faint smile appeared on his face. His voice slowly transmitted to Lu Feng's ears, but he didn't tell Lu Feng the root of all this. The true test isn't for you to crush fate, because fate exists forever. Your future existence is no longer something that fate can control. Of course, the current you hasn't reached that step yet. Therefore, what he wants isn't for you to crush some unfettered fate. He only wants you to transcend. He wants you to leave this path of fate, he wants you to enter Taoist. Taoist itself has already surpassed the final realm. It's a pity that you're too weak now. According to the arrangement of fate, you will defeat the last taboo king opponent 109 years later and enter the divine king's domain. At that time, your combat strength will be unparalleled and your talent will be shocking. The three divine kings' taboo mythological domains will be shattered in an extremely short period of time. Then, you will enter the ultimate heaven of the 33 layers with combat strength. Moreover, you also have the taboo mythological domain, so your combat strength will surpass the ultimate heaven of the 33 layers and become the final existence. At that time, you will take the final step, leave the path, and become a Taoist. Hearing this, Lu Feng's eyes flashed with a strange light. He knew that this was his destiny in the future. It was his destiny that had been set in stone. However, the current you has already violated everything. You actually want to leave the path and become a Taoist before you've even walked far. This is very surprising. Previously, I predicted everything correctly, but I didn't predict that it would appear. This thing that can change everything actually appeared. And you actually entered it and actually wanted to come into contact with it in advance. Therefore, when you make the right choice, you will have to face the peak of your strength. Only then will you face the transcendence and step into Taoist. Lu Feng was already silent. He could tell that this existence that looked exactly like him was talking about us. Raising his head and looking at this figure, Lu Feng said slowly, Then, what will happen in the future? Chapter 509. Future? What I care about is the future. It's me and her. The image didn't remain silent. He nodded lightly. Future? If you succeed this time, then you won't have a future. The so-called future is only for those who have fate in their hands. You've jumped off the path and entered the realm of Taoist. Then fate can no longer arrange for you. Similarly, you won't have a future. Even fate can't see your future. You and I can't see it. Everything would change in an unknown way. Therefore, you don't have a future. There's no future. Lu Feng was silent. He was thinking about everything that was said. After a while, he smiled. It was a smile of incomparable confidence. If I'm still on the path, then in the next 109 years, I will become an existence like the human king. I will become a true supreme existence. But that's not what I want to choose. What I want is true transcendence. You said it before. I am an emperor, a supreme and mighty emperor. My path can be arranged and manipulated by anyone. If I'm manipulated and set, then can I still be considered an emperor? Therefore, I don't want a future. I don't want a future. What I want is my truest self. What I want is to rely on myself to completely transcend. At this moment, what I want to transcend is no longer the human king. What I want to transcend is myself, the established Emperor Lu Feng. The image laughed. It laughed so crazily and crazily. However, Lu Feng saw a kind of pride. You already understand. You have completely understood everything. If that's the case, then my appearance this time is nothing much. I can already disappear, remember, since you understand the true meaning of being an emperor, you have already made your true choice. Then, don't retreat, don't hesitate. You have to walk your own path. You have to belong to a path that no existence can arrange or define. The voice gradually faded into nothingness, and the image also gradually disappeared. A moment later, it finally became completely transparent and completely disappeared. Standing in the endless darkness, a confident smile appeared on Lu Feng's face. Gradually, in the endless darkness of time and space, a brilliant path filled with truth, philosophy, and theorems suddenly appeared. At this moment, Lu Feng was standing quietly at the starting point of the path. The path ahead of him was truly bright and smooth. However, Lu Feng did not move. He knew that the deeper he went, the more he would gain as a person who had entered the Tao. However, he had already chosen to lead the way. His choice was to leave the broad and open road. He wanted to walk his own path, a path that belonged to no path. Taoless? Then, I will enter the domain of pathless. In the next moment, Lu Feng actually turned sideways and slowly walked towards the edge of the path. Finally, after an unknown amount of time, Lu Feng really came to the edge of the path. Standing on the path, what Lu Feng saw was endless darkness, an eternal unknown, a kind of confusion, and even endless death and oblivion. However, Lu Feng did not hesitate, not even the slightest hesitation. Taking one last look at the endless brilliance of the great path, Lu Feng's smile bloomed. In the next moment, he directly took a step forward. Impossible! I don't believe it. How is it possible for him? Even Liu Bei didn't do it so early. 4 voices appeared from 4 strange spaces in the universe. 4 incomparably ancient and yet incomparably young existences were constantly shocked. Looking at the strangeness of fate, they could no longer describe the shock in their hearts. Among these 4 existences, one was the immortal king, one was the devil king, and the other 2 were the divine king and the sage king who had never shown up. The immortal king was silent. He looked at the strangeness of fate. He looked at the eternal king who had disappeared, but he actually appeared again. Once again, he appeared even more terrifying and glorious. This was originally nothing much. However, in the next moment, the trajectory of the stars that represented the Eternal King actually disappeared. As for the existence of the Eternal King, he also disappeared. The Immortal King could see through fate. He was a supreme existence. What he had seen was even older than the God Kings, Supremes, and Overlords of epochs. However, this time, he actually could not see the trajectory of the Eternal King. Such a situation had happened once before. At that time, he knew that he had come too late, he had woken up too late. His outstanding and peerless talent had allowed him to successfully step on the path. Fate could not be controlled. However, this time he came so early. He came so quickly. However, before he could fully recover, the Eternal King had once again transcended. This time, compared to the previous time, it was even faster and more thorough. His gaze was distant, as if he could see through time and space. After a long time, the Immortal King sighed quietly. There was a depressed expression on his face that had never appeared before. As the Taboo King, he had existed for countless epochs. He had slept for countless epochs. Every time he woke up, it was for the sake of his final transcendence. Every time he appeared, he was standing at the pinnacle. Even if an existence like him had failed, he would never reveal such an expression. However, this time, he was depressed and sorrowful. Lu Feng, when I first saw you, you were merely an immature existence. You were so powerful that you had not even stepped foot into the Taboo King realm. Compared to us at our peak, it seemed as if we could kill you with a wave of our hand. However, your subsequent development has truly exceeded my expectations. The speed of your improvement cannot be described with the word terrifying. Back then, when you fought against the Devil King's clone, although I did not pay attention to it, the entire process was completely displayed in the star fate. I personally witnessed everything. I witnessed the process of you evolving from an ordinary monstrous genius to a Taboo King. I am already unable to describe such a speed. Although that was only the Devil King's clone. However, he was already equivalent to a monstrous genius of the epoch who possessed 6 supreme powers. Furthermore, he was an entire cultivation level stronger than you. Yet, you actually succeeded. An indescribable feeling of vicissitudes appeared on the Immortal King's face. In the past, when he woke up the most recent time, it was the era of the Mortal King. During that era, he had once witnessed the changes in the Mortal King's fate. At that time, although the Mortal King's transformation was world-shocking and terrifying, it could be said to be the first in history. However, compared to Lu Feng, it was still inferior. The difference in speed was simply too great. Now, only a few months have passed since we met. Yet, you have actually already surpassed your path and escaped the control of fate. Great perseverance, astonishing, world-shocking. To be able to abandon your own future and accomplish such a magnificent feat, Lu Feng, apart from Liu Bei, you are the second person I truly admire from the bottom of my heart. Your future no longer has a limit. No existence can control your existence anymore. However, if you think that you can become the greatest king, a true supreme eternal king, then you are gravely mistaken. We, the 4 great Taboo Kings, have traveled through countless spacetime. Before you appeared, the greatest epoch of the countless epochs in the universe belonged to the 4 of us. Our power is not something you can imagine. I hope that after you walk out of fate and embark on your own path, you can still be as terrifying as before. One day we will fight. That will be the moment when the true Supreme Eternal King is born. His voice gradually faded away. At this moment, the Immortal King once again entered a wondrous state, a process of recovery. Lu Feng's transformation caused many Supremes to exclaim in surprise. Previously, they had not made a move because they could control fate. Although they still could not see the trajectory of Lu Feng's fate clearly, they could still vaguely sense it. However, now that Lu Feng had walked out of the Destiny Starplate, No one could sense his existence anymore. Many otherworldly supremes were awakened, and many ancient supreme kings were revived. 4,000 years ago they had felt such a change, and now they felt it once again. Regardless of whether it was a conspiracy or a hope, all the supremes were completely silent at this moment. In the end, he still succeeded. You made the right bet this time. Alchemy Saint Rong looked at Tu Tianxin with a strange expression. Although he also thought highly of Lu Feng, he was still lacking in confidence compared to Tu Tianxin's unwavering determination. However, he had not expected that Lu Feng would really succeed. Really, it was so easy to complete a magnificent feat and miracle that had never been done before. Tu Tianxin's face was no longer as nervous as before. When he heard Alchemy Saint Rong's words, he nodded his head gently. There was a relaxed expression on his face, as well as an incomparable sense of pride and arrogance. I said that he would definitely surpass the human monarch realm. Although his current strength is still a little weaker than a human monarch of the same grade, he has already achieved a feat. However, he has already done something that a human monarch could not do. Given the human monarch's shocking talent, unparalleled willpower, and terrifying opportunities, he has already achieved it. He only completed his transcendence at the last moment. However, Lu Feng completed it so early. Although he has lost all protection and the blessing of the universe's origin source, he has still managed to achieve it. His future might even be envied by the universe's origin source. However, by taking this step, he has already completely removed all the shackles that have been suppressing his body. From now on, he will be able to wander freely in the universe. Tu Tianxin's words were filled with indescribable fear and an unprecedented sense of pride and arrogance. To be able to surpass like this, to be able to walk a path at the starting point, this was a kind of great willpower. This meant that Lu Feng had given up on the rapid advancement, the countless fortuitous encounters, and the blessing of the universe's origin source. From now on, he had become a person envied by the heavens. How much courage did this require? Are you satisfied? I'm also satisfied. Since Lu Feng has already displayed such a state, then I will also have to express. From now on, besides you, I will be his second Dao protector. Chapter 5:10. Apart from the Great Desolation Totem, everyone else had sensed this shocking change. Of course, everyone was referring to those who stood at the pinnacle, such as the second ancestor, the King of Life and Death, and the Spirit King. They were the only ones who had sensed this change. However, what they sensed was only a change. They were still unable to know what had happened. The two of them looked at each other and saw the slight confusion in each other's eyes. Let's wait. I can sense that all these changes have something to do with Lu Feng. The only person who can cause such a change is Lu Feng, said the second ancestor confidently. As an existence with a direct connection to Lu Feng's bloodline, he could sense a little more than the Spirit King. As a result, he spoke extremely seriously and solemnly. The Spirit King nodded gently. He looked at the location of the crack with an extremely strange expression. What should we do? He transcended so early. What should we do in the future? In the dark and boundless hall, those pairs of eyes appeared once again. Their voices were a kind of profound display. Their existence was a principle that reigned above the laws. Although they had never revealed their true forms, they were all supreme and eternal existences. When their voices appeared, they transformed into various supreme abilities. Then, they became pure voices again. When this voice fell, another voice appeared once again. This was yet another supreme sound system. These people were all able to achieve the ultimate realm of absolute obedience with word. Don't appear, wait, continue, wait. The human monarch of the past had reached the pinnacle of cultivation. He was the greatest existence since ancient times, but he was still plotted against by us. Even if he has surpassed the human monarch, What can he do? Over the past 4,000 years, we have also received the most terrifying strengthening. Our power is much, much stronger than when we plotted against the human monarch 4,000 years ago. Back then, we were able to plot against the human monarch. Now, in the future, we can still control him. Let's wait. Now is not the time for us to appear. We still need to wait. Lu Feng stood quietly in the middle of the great hall, a confident and proud smile on his face like never before. He looked at the endless world of emptiness, and his voice slowly appeared. Now it should be fine. Once again, they were back to the starting point. His body, which had already dissipated, appeared once again. And this time, it was even more terrifying and inconceivable, because Lu Feng had broken through a shocking breakthrough, an indescribably terrifying breakthrough. Lu Feng had entered the third stage of the Great Devil True Body, the large success stage of the Purple Gold Great Devil Body. Now, he was at the perfect beginner stage. As a telekinesis master, Lu Feng's spiritual transformation had allowed him to achieve a breakthrough. Low-level Wang's psychic master. Lu Feng's psychic master and warrior levels had both made terrifying breakthroughs. It was unbelievable and indescribable. At this moment, Lu Feng was fearless, even if he were to face a true god. The last time Lu Feng had broken through was only a few days ago. However, in just a few days, his strength had increased once again. This speed was too shocking. Upon hearing Lu Feng's voice, the voice that had appeared before finally rang out again. Sure enough, it appeared for you. Countless eras have passed. It has appeared in all sorts of ways, searching for an existence that could analyze everything. However, in the end it failed. Even your so-called taboo king was unable to do so. He didn't even dare to try and gave up. As for you, you are the first and only existence that has attempted to do so. However, this one and only existence has really become the only one. Lu Feng, congratulations, you have become the first existence in countless eras to see the contents recorded on the sacred tablet. Upon hearing this, Lu Feng's eyes remained calm. He still had that indescribable look of confidence. It was as if all of this was nothing. All of this wasn't a pleasant surprise. He nodded his head gently. You can see it now. The moment the voice sounded, Lu Feng felt the space and time change. Heaven and earth had changed. In the next moment, he appeared in his original position. That illusory figure still existed beside him. Lu Feng knew that it was the Great Wilderness Totem's artifact spirit. In front of him, the ordinary-looking sacred tablet stood quietly for a long time. How was it? Did you succeed? The Great Wilderness Totem's artifact spirit's eyes flickered when he saw Lu Feng's figure appear. He looked at Lu Feng with an anxious expression. His original body had suppressed this sacred tablet for countless years. No one had ever been able to enter this place and see everything. It was also incomparably interested in everything that was recorded on the stone tablet. Previously, it had naturally sensed the strange fluctuation that had occurred within the stone tablet. This was something that had never happened when the Divine King entered this place. Therefore, he knew that there must have been a shocking change. And this change was very likely that Lu Feng had really succeeded. Looking at the Great Wilderness Totem's artifact spirit, Lu Feng was still smiling. He nodded his head gently. I have succeeded. The Great Wilderness Totem's artifact spirit's illusory figure, upon hearing these words, actually started to shake. He actually showed a momentary sluggishness. Then, a terrifying fluctuation appeared. Lu Feng knew that this was the Great Wilderness Totem's artifact spirit's excitement. He didn't ask anything, because he knew that if Lu Feng was willing to tell him, he would tell him. If Lu Feng didn't want to tell him, there was nothing he could do even if he asked. Lu Feng looked at the Great Wilderness Totem's artifact spirit and smiled. I have passed the test. However, I still don't know what's on it. I need to take a look before I can know. After saying this, Lu Feng looked at the sacred tablet. Unlike before, what he saw was an empty space. At this moment, Lu Feng finally saw everything that appeared on the sacred tablet. An indescribable pattern was recorded on it. But after Lu Feng finished reading it, a strange fluctuation appeared in his eyes. Although Lu Feng had never studied these things, he had never studied them. However, after he finished reading it, a strange understanding appeared in his mind. It was a complete understanding. Lu Feng stared blankly at the sacred tablet in front of him. And this process took an entire day and night. When Lu Feng woke up, the great wilderness totem's artifact spirit once again showed that slight fluctuation. He looked at Lu Feng, waiting for Lu Feng to explain to him. At this moment, Lu Feng finally went completely silent. Silence. It was also silence. There was an indescribable silence. In his eyes, after the transformation, there was finally a fluctuation in his eternal eyes. That was called shock. After a long time, Lu Feng took a deep breath. He looked at the great wilderness totem's artifact spirit with an extremely strange expression. I finally understand why even the universe couldn't tolerate its existence. It would rather be buried with an era to completely annihilate it. The great wilderness totem's artifact spirit looked at Lu Feng, shaking even more obviously. Unlike Lu Feng, the great wilderness totem's appearance was completely created by the desolate era. It could be said that it was the only remnant of the entire desolate era. It was more concerned than anyone else about the culprit that destroyed its own era. Although one of the culprits was either it or himself. What exactly is on this? Lu Feng went silent again. After a while, a solemn expression appeared in his eyes. Looking at the great wilderness totem's artifact spirit, Lu Feng said slowly, "This isn't the origin of the destruction of the immortal devil era, nor is it a secret. What exists on this is a cultivation technique, or perhaps, an immortal technique." The great wilderness totem's artifact spirit was slightly taken aback. It looked at Lu Feng, and a strange sound came out of its illusory mouth. Immortal technique? Lu Feng nodded gently. At this moment, he looked at the stone tablet again. Yes, it is an immortal technique. This immortal technique is beyond the ultimate immortal technique, which is also the ultimate immortal technique beyond the Dharma of the heavens. Once its limit is used, it can really annihilate the entire universe. The sound of someone sucking in cold air could be heard. The great wilderness totem's artifact spirit looked at Lu Feng, and its body kept shaking. An immortal technique that could annihilate the entire universe. The ultimate immortal technique. All of this was too shocking, too indescribable. One had to know that the ultimate immortal technique of the immortal devil era was condensed by the legendary supreme beings of the immortal devil era. It was their ultimate power. Power was terrifying. Once it was used to its limit, it could destroy hundreds and thousands of super galaxies. However, this was just destroying galaxies. One had to know that there were hundreds of millions of galaxies in the universe. It was simply impossible for those ultimate immortal techniques to annihilate the entire universe. However, Lu Feng said that this mysterious stone tablet actually recorded such an immortal technique. An ultimate immortal technique that could annihilate the entire universe. Could this be related to the great calamity of the universe? This was the only possibility that the great wilderness totem's artifact spirit could think of. However, even the great calamity of the universe couldn't annihilate the entire universe. One had to know that this was annihilation, not destruction. Annihilation was the complete destruction of the entire universe. Although the great wilderness totem's artifact spirit was shocked, it didn't doubt Lu Feng's words. Of course, the main reason why it reacted this way was because this stone tablet was too terrifying. No wonder, no wonder. Sacrificing an entire era to accompany it in death. What's recorded on it is actually such a thing, silence, endless silence. Then, what is this ultimate immortal technique? Lu Feng didn't hesitate and softly said a few words. The name of this ultimate immortal technique is called 1 billion mortal realm, 1 billion immortals. 1 billion mortal realm, 1 billion immortals. This was the name of the ultimate immortal technique. At the extreme moment, 1 billion mortal realms were created. One mortal realm was a complete world. 1 billion mortal realms were the most complete and terrifying worlds. 1 billion mortal realms, 1 billion immortals. Once it was used, 1 billion worlds would appear and 1 billion supreme immortals would descend. This kind of power was enough to annihilate the entire universe. Good, what a domineering name. So, what was recorded on this tablet is actually such an existence. The great wilderness totem's artifact spirit didn't say anything else. It understood that perhaps only the 1 billion mortal worlds and 1 billion immortals were worthy of the word final, the ultimate immortal technique that could annihilate the universe. Lu Feng smiled helplessly at the great wilderness totem's artifact spirit. 1 billion mortal realms, 1 billion immortals, it's too terrifying. I even suspect that even if I reach that supreme realm, surpassing the Overlord of an epic, and shattering the supreme realm of the ultimate heaven of the 33 layers, I won't be able to fully unleash it. Now I've made another breakthrough in my strength through this experience. My strongest strength is comparable to a god-level expert. However, even if I give it my all, I'm afraid I won't be able to display the realm of 1 billion mortal realms, one speck of mortal realms. Lu Feng knew that even if it was just the realm of one speck of mortal realms, one speck of mortal realms, one speck of mortal power was unimaginable. Even if he displayed the ultimate combat strength and displayed the supreme supremacy technique, the power at that time wouldn't even be 1/10 of the power of one speck of mortal realms, one speck of immortal power. As for the ultimate realm, the existence of 1 billion mortal realms, 1 billion immortals, he probably wouldn't be able to display it even if he became a true supreme existence. Chapter 511. The ultimate immortal technique that can annihilate the entire universe is indeed terrifying. At this moment, Lu Feng truly understood what the ultimate immortal technique was. Alright, Lu Feng, you can leave now. Hearing the words of the great desolation totem artifact spirit, Lu Feng nodded his head lightly. For him, the ultimate immortal technique of the 1 billion mortal world and 1 billion immortals. Even the increase in his own level made Lu Feng feel that his gains from this trip were terrifying. Furthermore, Lu Feng had even completed the process of transcending. This was already an indescribable gain. Furthermore, in Lu Feng's heart, these were not the most important things. Because compared to his memories, compared to her whereabouts, everything else was nothing. Lu Feng did not have the slightest hesitation. He turned around and walked down the mountain. However, the moment Lu Feng took his first step, the voice of the great desolation totem artifact spirit was heard again. Don't tell me you really don't care about the ultimate reward, about my existence? The great desolation totem artifact spirit knew that although it opened this time for the existence of the stone tablet, it was rumored that it was about to recognize a master. Even if the rumors were true, that it was only a grade 11 artifact, this was already shocking enough. As for Lu Feng, he knew the real situation. He knew that his true peak state belonged to a peak 12th grade artifact. However, Lu Feng did not seem to care about being recognized as a master. Hearing this, Lu Feng stopped in his tracks. He looked at the great desolation totem artifact spirit and said with a smile, "What's in life will always be there, what's not in life can't be forced. If I can get it, then it's my fortune, if not, why should I care? Furthermore, this time, my gains are already too great." Hearing this, the great desolation totem artifact spirit was silent. After a moment, Lu Feng actually heard it let out a laugh. "Indeed, your heart is very magnanimous. Since that's the case, then I won't hide anything from you. Actually, I don't mind recognizing you as my master. It's a pity that you don't have the qualifications to control me now. Even if it recognizes you as its master, you won't be of any use. Your strength is too weak, too weak. If one day you can become the Divine King, even if you don't have the combat power of the 33rd layer of the ultimate heaven, you will still be able to become the Divine King. I too am willing to serve you. At that time, you will know how terrifyingly powerful I am. Emperor Lu Feng, do your best. The moment you become the Divine King, I will recognize you as my master and allow you to truly command me. His voice gradually faded away. His silhouette also gradually disappeared. But the moment the spirit of the great desolate totem disappeared, it did not see the strange look in the corner of Lu Feng's eyes. It did not hear the last few words Lu Feng muttered, "Primogenitor Divine King, I understand." More than a month had passed. If it weren't for the fact that the great desolate totem was so terrifying that even heretic supremes couldn't enter, the Lu family's second patriarch and the Holy Spirit King would have already entered. However, after more than 30 days of waiting, these two invincible existences still felt a sense of panic in their hearts. Of course, their anxiousness had already disappeared. This was because the indescribable change had made them understand that Lu Feng was probably undergoing some kind of shocking metamorphosis. The strange phenomenon from before had been the completion of his metamorphosis. The two of them quietly looked at the crack, both of them looking forward to it. They understood that the metamorphosis had already been completed, which meant that Lu Feng's return was not far away. It seemed to confirm their guesses. Not long after, an existence slowly walked out from the crack. Although he was walking lightly, it was as if he was the center of everything in this world. His existence made the entire space-time dim. Every step he took was filled with a sense of nobility and supreme majesty. It was as if wherever he went, it was his territory. The feeling that Lu Feng gave off was really hard to describe. Even the two invincible almighties felt a faint sense of surprise when they saw Lu Feng. The two of them looked at each other and saw the astonishment in each other's eyes. At this moment, the same word appeared in their minds at the same time. Emperor. An emperor was an emperor. At this moment, Lu Feng was a true emperor. Although he was alone and did not have any decorations or millions of people crowding around him, Lu Feng's existence was the definition of an emperor. Finally, Lu Feng slowly arrived in front of the two of them under the gazes of many experts. The two of them smiled happily when they saw Lu Feng. Looking at Lu Feng, the second ancestor said, "Lu Feng, it seems like you have gained a lot this time." Lu Feng looked at the second ancestor but did not reply. He looked on quietly. After a long time, he nodded his head gently. "Yes, I have gained a lot." The second patriarch was slightly taken aback as he stared at Lu Feng with a strange expression on his face. At this moment, he felt that Lu Feng's supreme dignity seemed to be filled with a strange emotion. This seemed to be a kind of anger. A kind of shocking anger. Even with Lu Feng's current strength and temperament, he was actually unable to hide this kind of anger. The second ancestor really did not know what Lu Feng had seen or understood that would cause him to show such an expression. The second ancestor frowned slightly. He wanted to ask something. However, the Spirit King seemed to have noticed something. He said straightforwardly, "All right, let's talk when we get back. This place is not suitable for talking." Lu Feng still respected the Spirit King, who was the first monarch below the sovereign stage. He bowed respectfully and did not object. In the next moment, the Spirit King stood up and flew off into the distance. Beside him, the second ancestor did the same. However, he brought Lu Feng with him. In an instant, many human monarchs and gods, as well as the 12 ancestors of the Lu family, all stood up and flew off into the distance to a vast fortress. This was the front line of the war between the human race and the alien race. It was also the place where many terrifying experts of the human race were stationed all year round. Not only were there experts from the Federation government and a few other organizations, but there were also experts from many aristocratic families. Of course, the Federal University also had some experts. However, their numbers were really very few. This was because the Federal University was a force of psychic. Psychics were not very fond of fighting. Here, Lu Feng saw a lot of people wearing BUCC uniforms. Apart from these, many experts from the Federation Bank and a few other superpowers had also come here to help the human race guard this place. In the entire human race, whether it's the 8 great aristocratic families, the hundreds of first-rate aristocratic families, or the thousands of second-rate aristocratic families, it's the same. Every 100 years, they will send different people here to help the human race guard this place. This is a kind of responsibility. It's a responsibility that no one can shirk. Lu Feng nodded slightly when he heard the explanation of a branch divine spirit expert of the Lu family. Suddenly, Lu Feng seemed to have thought of something. He looked at the old ancestor beside him and asked directly, "Old ancestor, do you know that the experts from the Yuyo family have also come here?" The old ancestor of the Lu family was slightly taken aback. However, he still nodded slightly. On the surface, the Yuyo family and the human king Lu family are the 2 divine king aristocratic families that are close to each other. The Yuyo family has never given up on surpassing the Lu family. Unfortunately, although they have existed for much longer than our Lu clan, in terms of strength, they are far from being comparable to us. Even so, on the surface, the Yuyo clan is still doing very well. They have never declined a situation where experts are stationed here. The number of experts they have sent is not much less than the number of experts the Lu family has. When he heard this, Lu Feng nodded gently. However, a cold glint appeared in his eyes. The second ancestor frowned slightly when he saw Lu Feng's change. To be honest, they would not have allowed Lu Feng to enter the Great Desolate Totem if Lu Feng had not obtained some benefits. Although the Great Desolate Totem was extremely terrifying and was a grade 11 artifact, it was still inferior to the Human King Hall. The Lu family would not allow Lu Feng to risk his life for a useless Great Desolate Totem. However, when Lu Feng returned from the Great Desolate Totem, the second ancestor was puzzled. Lu Feng had not been like this when he had entered the Great Desolate Totem. Finally, the group entered the hall. The Spirit King seemed to think of something when he saw the silent Lu Feng and the Life and Death King. He smiled and said, "I'm going out to deal with some matters. If there is anything, you can talk about it yourselves." As a Spirit King, he would not purposely say anything nice. He was very direct. After seeing that there was something wrong with Lu Feng, he immediately left. He knew that if it had been any other matter, Lu Feng would have explained it long ago. However, he did not say anything. This meant that he did not want anyone else to know about it. The second ancestor nodded gently while Lu Feng bowed respectfully. A while later, only Lu Feng and the Life and Death King remained in the hall. The second ancestor fell silent as he looked at Lu Feng. He wanted to wait for Lu Feng to speak first. Lu Feng was also silent. He looked at the second ancestor with a complicated expression. Lu Feng respected the second ancestor very much. After all, the second ancestor had saved his life. No matter what, he was still his savior. However, this matter was just too important. He really did not know what to say or how to say it. Silence. Absolute silence. After a while, Lu Feng finally spoke slowly. "Second ancestor, this time, I have recovered the memories that were sealed when I was young." Chapter 512. The second patriarch was slightly taken aback. He did not understand what Lu Feng meant. Lu Feng's memories had been sealed. Someone had mentioned this to him before. This was a seal that Lu Tao had set up to make Lu Feng forget about his past unhappiness. When Lu Feng's bloodline had awakened, this memory had already been restored. However, Lu Feng had said that he had already recovered his sealed childhood memories. This left the second patriarch at a loss. After a while, he seemed to have thought of something. A slightly strange expression appeared on his face. He looked at Lu Feng and asked slowly, "Are you talking about the final shackle? The seal that was set up by the primogenitor? In the Lu family, there was only one kind of person who could be called a primogenitor. That was the supreme of the other path. The primogenitor of the Lu family was a great existence at the supreme of the other path. The seal that had been set up by the supreme had actually disappeared. This was really inconceivable." Lu Feng nodded his head gently. He looked at the second patriarch quietly and said, "I have already remembered everything about her." The second patriarch was silent for a moment. After a while, he nodded his head gently. "Remember? Then let's just remember. Once, your father begged me, hoping that I could seal your memories completely so that you would not be immersed in pain. After all, you were powerless to change anything at that time. Even your father couldn't do the same. However, you are different now. The number one monarch in the universe, the taboo monarch, Lu Feng. Based on this, anyone would be willing to give you face. You are just a legitimate daughter of the Yuyo family. I'm afraid this is nothing." Lu Feng remained silent. He did not answer the second patriarch. A moment later, he let out a deep sigh. "Second patriarch, do you know how she is now?" This was what Lu Feng was most concerned about. She had once appeared in the Lu family and stayed with the Lu family for 2 whole years. All this proved that the Yuyo family and the Lu family had reached some kind of agreement. When the agreement expired, she had returned and accepted the pain of unlimited blood extraction. She had become the source of the Yuyo family's blood. She had become a tool. Did the Lu family, who had an agreement with the Yuyo family, know about all this? If the Lu family knew about this and still made such a choice, then what would Lu Feng do? In Lu Feng's heart, the Lu family was already his own family. His own blood flow was the blood of the Lu family. During this period of time, it was with the help of the Lu family that he finally reached his current position. It could not be further Lu's and the family's. Therefore, Lu Feng no longer held any grudges against the Lu family. He knew that this was his own family. However, what if the Lu family knew about this? Or perhaps, everything that happened to her now had something to do with the Lu family? How would Lu Feng face the Lu family in the future? The complicated look in his eyes became even more obvious. The second patriarch looked at Lu Feng in confusion. He understood the meaning behind Lu Feng's expression. However, what was so complicated about the current state of the Yuyo family's legitimate daughter? The second patriarch shook his head gently. "Why would I pay attention to a legitimate daughter? She's probably still in the Yuyo family. After all, the Yuyo family is different from the human monarch Lu family. They don't train their legitimate descendants so early." Lu Feng saw all the second patriarch's reactions. He had a vague feeling that the second forefather was not pretending to be like this, but that he really did not know. After taking a deep breath, Lu Feng looked at the second patriarch and said, "Second patriarch, why did she come to the Lu family? I remember that our relationship with the Yuyo family wasn't very good. Why did she come to the Lu family, as the legitimate daughter of the Yuyo family?" The second patriarch fell silent. He looked at Lu Feng and frowned slightly. If someone else had asked him this question, he would have already taught them a lesson. However, he couldn't do that to Lu Feng. Of course, the main reason was that the second patriarch had seen it. He had seen Lu Feng's cold, confused, hesitant, and complicated expression. He had seen it before. However, this was the first time he had seen Lu Feng's expression. He knew that if it wasn't something extremely important, Lu Feng wouldn't have shown such an expression. The second patriarch looked at Lu Feng and nodded gently. "I happen to know about this matter as well. Because this matter back then wasn't a small matter." The girl called Yuyo Qingran seemed to be the only granddaughter of the Yuyo family's patriarch. When she was born, she seemed to have contracted a serious illness. This was a bloodline defect that prevented her from living for long. Later on, in order to treat her illness, the current patriarch of the Yuyo family offered a 9th-grade divine item and some past favors in exchange for the great ancestor's help. Lu Feng wasn't confused about this. After all, the Lu family's great ancestor was Alchemy Saint Lu. He was one of the 3 great alchemy saint masters in the world. He was also the only one who could pinpoint his exact location and find him. Therefore, it was only right to look for him. Back then, the great ancestor was in seclusion and seemed to be about to break through some important realm. Naturally, the value of the Yuyo family's legitimate daughter or a 9th-grade divine item couldn't be compared to the great ancestor's breakthrough. Moreover, this girl wouldn't be in any danger until she reached a certain age. Therefore, she stayed in the Lu family and waited for the great ancestor to come out of seclusion. This wait lasted for 2 years. Lu Feng was silent. After a moment, he let out a long sigh. At this moment, Lu Feng was finally relieved. The thing he was most worried about didn't happen in the end. As long as the Lu family had nothing to do with all this, then everything would be fine. Seeing Lu Feng's relieved look, the second patriarch felt that something shocking must have happened. In the end, he didn't wait for Lu Feng to start. Instead, he chose to ask first. Lu Feng, what exactly happened? Lu Feng was silent. He was silent again. This was because he really didn't know where to start. After a long time, he let out a long sigh. However, the cold look in his eyes was frightening. Second patriarch, if I want to enter the Yuyo family, will the Lu family help me? Lu Feng looked at the second patriarch quietly. When he heard this, the second patriarch revealed a look of surprise. Enter the Yuyo family? On the surface, the Yuyo family was known as a superfamily that was comparable to the Lu family. However, everyone knew that the Yuyo family couldn't be compared to the human king Lu family. There was a fundamental difference between the two. After hesitating for a moment, the second patriarch said, Lu Feng, although the Yuyo family is known to be on par with the Lu family, in terms of strength, the difference between us is very big. Not to mention the Yuyo clan, even if the other 6 godly king clans, excluding the Supreme Emperor clan, joined forces with all the first-rate and second-rate clans, my Lu clan would not be afraid at all. This is a fundamental difference. Even so, we can't act rashly. It's not because of the so-called rules. After all, rules are set by the strong. However, we really can't go overboard with the Yuyo family. This is because the Supreme Divine King of the Yuyo family, the Emperor Divine King, and the human king of the Lu family had karma. If not for that karma, the Lu family wouldn't have tolerated the Yuyo family so much. When he heard this, Lu Feng fell silent. He nodded gently. Indeed, the Lu family had tolerated the Yuyo family too much. The two families weren't on the same level at all. However, in the face of the Yuyo family's excessive actions over the years, the human king Lu family had always tolerated them. It was because of this that the Yuyo family and the human king Lu family were on the same level. However, when he heard this, Lu Feng raised his head slightly. He looked at the second patriarch and waited for him to continue. The second patriarch smiled gently and said, Over the years, the Yuyo family has indeed gone overboard with their actions. The favor that the Lu family owed them back then has already been repaid. Perhaps we won't casually exterminate the Yuyo family, but we can still give them a warning. When he heard the girl's question and Lu Feng's question, the second patriarch vaguely understood something. He knew that the Yuyo family must have done something to that girl that made Lu Feng so angry. That was why Lu Feng had said something like that. Although the second patriarch hadn't interacted with Lu Feng for a long time, he knew that Lu Feng was an impulsive person based on the information he had gathered. And this kind of person was usually someone who valued comradeship. He could forget about life and death for the people he protected and was willing to give up everything. There was no doubt that such a person wasn't liked by any intelligent person. However, the human monarch Lu family didn't care about such things. Their ancestor, the human monarch, had been such a straightforward person. He had once offended many apex races in the universe for the sake of a promise. He had once been hunted down by countless powerhouses in the universe. However, the human monarch was still the human monarch. This was the bloodline of the Lu family and the tradition of the Lu family. What they wanted was a hot-blooded man like him, not a demon who would cower and give up everything for the sake of some **T benefits. When he saw the second patriarch's sincere smile, Lu Feng smiled back. He nodded his head gently. Without any hesitation, he told the second patriarch everything he had seen on the sacred tablet. When he heard this, the second patriarch was clearly enraged. Of course, Lu Feng also understood that part of the second patriarch's anger was clearly on purpose. He might be angry, but he definitely wouldn't show it so obviously. He was doing this because of Lu Feng. As he looked at Lu Feng, the second patriarch muttered to himself for a moment before he said, "Lu Feng, you are a member of the Lu family. You owe Yuyo Qingran a debt of gratitude. She also owes the Lu family a debt of gratitude. The Lu family will not be ungrateful. You don't have to worry about this. We will return to the Lu family in a while. I will ask the ancestor for instructions. Regardless of whether the ancestor agrees or not, the great patriarch and I will stand by your side. Even if we cannot use the Lu family's name, we will use your status as the patriarch to help you rescue her." Lu Feng's heart trembled slightly. At the moment, he was filled with boundless gratitude towards the second patriarch. He had previously saved his life. Now, this debt was far more precious to Lu Fenglai than saving his life. No matter what, with the second patriarch's existence, who was unrivaled below the Supremes, there wouldn't be any danger this time. Lu Feng firmly believed that even if the Yuyo family had an extremely frightening foundation, they definitely wouldn't have a supreme being. Therefore, as long as the second patriarch appeared, everything would be fine. Of course, if the great patriarch appeared, then everything would be settled. Second patriarch, Lu Feng doesn't like to say things that are too beautiful. I promise you once again that in the future, the Lu family will be the family that I will do my best to protect. As long as the Lu family exists, I, Lu Feng, will exist. If I, Lu Feng, die, the Lu family will not. This was already Lu Feng's vow. He was using his own life to make this vow. In an instant, an extremely happy expression appeared on the second patriarch's face. He knew that he had made the right decision. Even though he had saved Lu Feng back then, Lu Feng hadn't shown such an expression. Now, he could make such a decision and say such a thing for the sake of protecting a child. This showed Lu Feng's temperament. Chapter 513. By the way, Lu Feng, did you make it to the end this time? This was the second forefather's concern. Previously, when Lu Feng mentioned Yuyo Qingran's problem, he said that he had seen it through a special method. He did not explain in detail. Therefore, the second forefather did not know the truth. At this moment, after confirming that she had nothing to do with the Lu family, Lu Feng finally felt completely at ease. Faced with the second forefather's question, Lu Feng only smiled and told him everything without hiding anything. I made it to the end, Lu Feng told him everything, except for the part about the transcendence Fudu that allowed him to transcend. Hearing this, even the second forefather, who was an invincible existence, could not help but feel shocked. Say, the origin of the Great Wilderness Totem is so terrifying. At its peak, the Great Wilderness Totem was a peak epic Overlord's power. It was a peak grade 12 artifact. A stone tablet that could bury the entire desolate epic. Even the universe would not allow its existence? What was recorded on it was the ultimate immortal technique, The ultimate immortal technique that could destroy the entire universe. 1 billion mortal world, 1 billion immortals. What a terrifying name! Exclamations and exclamations of emotions were heard. The second forefather never knew that there was such a terrifying thing in the universe. A stone tablet that could bury an epic and an immortal technique that could make the universe sink. Without a doubt, these things were taboo among taboo. Even the taboo kings would find it extremely difficult to obtain them. Wasn't the godly king from back then a clear example? Lu Feng's ability to obtain all these proved that in certain aspects, Lu Feng had surpassed the divine king, one of the 4 taboo kings. Good. 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 As expected of the son of the Lu family. The Lu family is proud of you. The glory of the Lu family did not need to be explained. Their mortal king Lu clan was already an invincible clan in the current world, and they were even capable of suppressing the Dishur clan. One had to know that the current divine king Dishi was the overlord of time. On the other hand, the Lu family was only a heterodox supreme. Even so, the Lu family was still clearly stronger than the lineage of Sakura, who had the overlord of time. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the Lu family was. As for the Lu family was so powerful that they didn't lack any glory that others respected. However, an existence like Lu Feng was still the pride of the Lu family and the pride of the Lu family. Lu Feng, the fact that you've obtained all of this is enough to prove everything. Your future is destined to be a supreme existence. We are all looking forward to the moment when you truly surpass the primogenitor. Although the human monarch was a primogenitor, the younger generations all dreamed of surpassing the primogenitor. Although they might not be able to realize it personally, being able to witness it was enough to make them proud. Lu Feng didn't say much. He just stood there indifferently. Before long, the Spirit King walked in. He didn't ask about Lu Feng. To him, these were not things that interested him. What he really wanted to know was everything that Lu Feng had experienced in the totem of the Great Wilderness. Naturally, Lu Feng couldn't be like the second patriarch and talk about everything in such detail. He chose to talk about everything. Of course, he didn't mention anything related to the sacred steel. When he heard that Lu Feng hadn't been recognized as the master of the Great Wilderness totem, the Spirit King was slightly disappointed. He looked at Lu Feng and sighed slightly. If that's the case, a taboo monarch has also entered before. However, the outcome was the same as yours. They also failed. If that's the case, I'm afraid that the totem of the Great Wilderness must recognize someone as its master. The divine king and emperor Lu Feng already represented the pinnacle of strength among the younger generation. However, this level of strength still wasn't enough to make it recognize someone as its master. This meant that no matter how heaven-defying a monster was, it was impossible to make it recognize someone as its master. If one wanted to obtain its existence, they had to use extreme strength to force it to recognize them as its master. Lu Feng was silent. In the end, he nodded gently. This was indeed the case. The Great Wilderness Totem was a terrifying object that only supreme strength could make it recognize someone as its master. Even if Lu Feng had obtained the ultimate immortal technique, he would still need to become a supreme divine king before he had the right to control the totem of the Great Desolation and make it his own. Therefore, Lu Feng wasn't lying. After all, the Great Wilderness Totem wasn't just itself anymore. Looks like this time's great fanfare has become a joke. It's all a joke. The Spirit King smiled faintly. This smile wasn't a bitter smile. It was a genuine smile. To him, this was nothing. For an existence like him, his mind was incomparably open and open-minded. However, Lu Feng, your harvest this time is quite huge. Looking at Lu Feng, the Spirit King had a strange look in his eyes. Previously, when Lu Feng entered the Great Wilderness Totem, he was only at the peak of the upheaval stage. According to legends, His cultivation as a Psyche Master was only at the King's Psyche Master level. But now, Lu Feng had become a perfect stage practitioner. This was indeed a shocking leap. One had to know that Lu Feng's process of reaching the peak of the upheaval stage was completed in front of everyone's eyes. That scene could be called a miracle. And now, he had become a perfect stage practitioner in only a month's time. Furthermore, the Spirit King understood that Lu Feng's cultivation method was terrifying. He was afraid that there would be another battle like that. He was even about to successfully break through to the peak of the perfect stage. This speed was simply indescribable. Lu Feng smiled faintly. His harvest this time couldn't even be described as huge. Before entering this place, Lu Feng had never thought that he would have such a harvest. But everything had happened just like that. Of course, to Lu Fenglai, the most precious thing was the recovery of his memories and news of her. Your Majesty Spirit King, my harvest this time is indeed not small. Lu Feng didn't like to be overly hypocritical. As an emperor, he didn't need to be hypocritical. What he obtained was what he got. Since his harvest was huge, Lu Feng wouldn't be hypocritical and say that he didn't obtain anything. Hearing Lu Feng's words, the Spirit King nodded slightly but didn't say anything else. The second ancestor, who was standing quietly to the side, smiled and finally walked over. All right, Lu Feng, it's time for us to leave. You should know that you still have things to do. In an instant, a shocking light appeared in Lu Feng's eyes. He still had things to do. Indeed, he still had the most important thing to do. Second ancestor, let's go. Compared to her existence, everything else was nothing. For her, Lu Feng was even willing to give up his life. As a result, the most anxious person right now was Lu Feng. The Spirit King didn't try to keep the various members of the Lu family back, nor did he try to keep Lu Feng. This was because Lu Feng's existence really did put the Spirit King in a very passive position. It could be said that the countless changes that had occurred in the foreign battlefield in the past year were all inextricably linked to Lu Feng. Although he didn't fear anything, the Spirit King still felt tired of all these troubles from the bottom of his heart. Now that Lu Feng had left, apart from saving him a lot of trouble, the Spirit King no longer had to worry about Lu Feng's safety. Countless resplendent lights flickered at the edge of the Dylan black hole cluster. This was the largest cluster of black holes in the universe. It seemed like even time and space could be swallowed in this area. No living creature could survive. However, this cluster of black holes was the most lively cluster of black holes. This was because, apart from those fixed ancient and mysterious transportation arrays, the only way to enter the battlefield in the foreign battlefield was through this place. With the teleportation formations constructed by countless amazing existences, one could completely avoid the terrifying crushing force at the center of the Dylan black hole cluster and enter the battlefield in the outer area. On this day, with a terrifying flash of light, Lu Feng, the second ancestor of the Lu family, and the other 12 almighty ancestors appeared at the periphery of the Dylan black hole cluster. Lu Feng sighed emotionally when he sensed the familiar feeling of space in the primal universe. He'd spent far too much time in the battlefield of the outer realm. It had been more than a year in the real world alone. With the addition of time, Lu Feng had spent at least 7 years in the foreign battlefield. 7 years. One had to know that Lu Feng was only 18 years old, according to the correct age calculation. 7 years was far too long. Looking at Lu Feng's strange expression, the second ancestor smiled gently. How is it? Do you have a lot of emotions? Lu Feng nodded gently. When he had first entered this place, he had only been an ordinary prodigy of the era. However, after coming out, he had even surpassed the Taboo King. He had been forced to come here previously. He had been tricked by the Chaos King to enter this place. At that time, he had only been an evolution stage warrior. However, now that he had returned, he had already become a perfect stage warrior. He only needed a little more time to enter the pinnacle of the perfect stage warrior. Then, his strength would reach an indescribable horror. At that time, he would be able to completely suppress even an ordinary pinnacle god with the help of his two souls. Now, he could easily kill countless people of his past self. Now that you are here, you can use the Sky Network. I think many people were worried about you because of your sudden departure. Lu Feng's eyes lit up when he heard this. The next moment, he opened the space exclusive to Psychic. He took out his Sky Network connector and placed it on his watch. Lu Feng knew that the second ancestor was right. There were too many companions that he needed to contact. Back then, he had left so quietly. There were even rumors that he had died. Presumably, many people were extremely worried. Now, he had returned. In that case, it was time to contact them. Lu Feng looked at the people connected to his Sky Network. The first person he saw was Li Yongheng. This was a good brother that he had played with since he was young. Unfortunately, Li Yongheng was a direct descendant of the Yaolanli family. Moreover, his bloodline was sealed. Once he recovered, he would definitely be a terrifying existence like the Emperor of Massacre. Chapter 514. According to the information of the Li family's disciple, Li Yongheng should still be in seclusion recovering his bloodline. Hence, Lu Feng didn't contact him. Besides Li Yongheng, Lu Feng's two roommates were also on good terms with him. One of them was Qi Yunqing, while the other was Su Wenchao. When Luo Yunyang had left school, Qi Yunqing had been seriously injured and had been sent to the hospital to recuperate. In order to punish him, Luo Yunyang had concealed everything. Hence, Su Wenchao and Lu Feng had headed to Mu Shuiyan's Sky Cloud star system. It was also there that Lu Feng had met the King of Chaos, and in the end, he had entered the battlefield in the outer region. Only now did he finally leave. However, Lu Feng didn't contact the two of them right away. After all, compared to the two of them, there was someone more important that he needed to contact. Shuiyan, Lu Feng fell silent as he stared at the flickering profile picture on the Sky Network. The second patriarch was slightly puzzled when he saw Lu Feng's expression. His impression of Lu Feng had always been that he was extremely decisive when it came to killing. However, Luo Yunyang actually had such a hesitant expression on his face. This puzzled the second patriarch. However, the second patriarch didn't say anything. He knew that Lu Feng would take care of everything. Lu Feng hesitated slightly as he looked at the Sky Network. He wanted to put it away. However, in the end, he stopped himself. Lu Feng knew that there were some things that had to be faced. One day, he would have to face everything head-on. He could even face life and death, cross paths, and give up on his future. What else did he have to be afraid of? After taking a deep breath, Lu Feng finally sent a call request to Mu Shuiyan. Time passed slowly. At the moment, Lu Feng's heart was beating violently. This feeling was many times more intense than when he had fought the Demon King. Lu Feng had always had an indescribable feeling for Mu Shuiyan. In the past, Mu Shuiyan had indeed been the first girl that had moved his heart. Back then, the two of them had met for the first time on the Sky Network. At the time, Lu Feng's heart had really started beating. In the following days, as the two of them had interacted, Lu Feng's heart had gradually moved closer to her. However, every time Lu Feng wanted to accept Mu Shuiyan, a vague figure had appeared in his mind. Lu Feng knew that this figure was actually Yuyo's Qingran. The two of them were simply too difficult to part with. Even the endless seal set up by the Divergent Path Supremacy hadn't been able to completely suppress his memories. There had always been a faint remnant of his memories. It wasn't until the Mu family had forced her back in the Heavenly Clouds galaxy that Lu Feng had finally let go of her feelings completely when he had seen her sorrowful and heartbroken expression. At the time, he had understood that no matter what had happened in the past, it was all in the past. He had already forgotten everything he had experienced. Since he was Lu Feng, a brand new Lu Feng, choosing Mu Xuan had been the right choice. Now that he had recovered all his memories, Lu Feng's heart was really trembling. Whether it was Mu Xuan or Yu Qingran, he absolutely couldn't give up on them. One of them represented the most beautiful memories of the past. Lu Feng could still vaguely remember every word she had said when they were children. He still remembered the last moment of that scene. In her desperate eyes there was a glimmer of hope. She had asked him where he was. How could Lu Feng give up on Qingran? How could he give up on her? He couldn't do it. He absolutely couldn't do it. And when facing Mu Xuan, Lu Feng was similarly unable to give up. This represented a completely new type of love. Although there had never been a vow of undying love, nor had there been a life and death struggle, but between the two of them, there was true love. Lu Feng couldn't give up on Mu Xuan either. Therefore, Lu Feng was really afraid at this moment. He was afraid that Mu Xuan wouldn't accept it. He was afraid that Yu Qingran wouldn't accept it either. He was afraid that the two people he loved would leave him. The notification music kept flashing, but no one picked up. Finally, when the time came, the Sky Network notified him that the other party couldn't get through. Lu Feng fell silent for a moment. He didn't know what he was feeling at the moment. He was glad, but he was also disappointed. What's wrong, Lu Feng? Can't you get through to her? When he saw Lu Feng's strange expression, the second forefather finally opened his mouth to ask. Lu Feng nodded his head gently. I just can't get through to her right now. It's okay, second forefather. Lu Feng wasn't worried about Mu Xuan's safety at all. After the Mu family found out about their relationship, they definitely wouldn't dare do anything to Mu Xuan. It could be said that in the Federation, Mu Xuan wouldn't be in any danger. After all, her existence couldn't threaten anyone. A moment later, Lu Feng continued to look at the Sky Network. Without hesitation, he dialed Su Wenchao's number. Unfortunately, Su Wenchao and Mu Xuan were the same. No one picked up. In the end, Lu Feng called Qi Yunqing's number. In the end, it was still the same. At this moment, Lu Feng's heart gradually sank. If only one person didn't pick up, then perhaps it would be normal. However, if everyone didn't pick up, then there was a problem. In the end, Lu Feng called for the last call. The person he contacted was Li Tianlai. This time, there was no waiting. When Lu Feng called, Li Tianlai picked up immediately. Lu Feng looked at Li Tianlai, who was calculating something with his head lowered. His eyes flashed with excitement. Li Tianlai really took good care of Lu Feng. Although this was his former principal, Lu Feng felt that Li Tianlai was more like an older brother to him. Senior brother. These two simple words made Li Tianlai, who was engrossed in writing something, stiffen. It could be said that Li Tianlai was Dao Songtian's youngest disciple. There was only one person who could call him senior brother. When he saw Lu Feng's slightly changed appearance, Li Tianlai didn't feel any unfamiliarity. He was filled with an extremely excited expression. Lu Feng, you're back. Although most of the people in the Federation didn't know about Lu Feng, let alone Li Tianlai, the peak existences were paying close attention to him. Because of his relationship with Lu Feng, Li Tianlai was also paying attention to Lu Feng through the Federal University's network. It could be said that Li Tianlai knew everything that happened to Lu Feng in the foreign region battlefield. Li Tianlai knew that Lu Feng was actually in the foreign region battlefield. Li Tianlai was even more familiar with the battlefield in the foreign regions. This was because the inheritance of the foreign race's Void Emperor Dong Ru Great Emperor was in the foreign region battlefield. Li Tianlai naturally knew that the Heavenly Network couldn't be used in the foreign region battlefield. Now that Lu Feng was using the Heavenly Network to contact him, it could only mean one thing. Lu Feng had returned. Emperor Lu Feng had returned. Lu Feng could clearly see that the excitement on Li Tianlai's face wasn't fake at all. He was truly incomparably excited. At this moment, Lu Feng's mood was completely cheerful. Senior brother, I just came back. Li Tianlai nodded gently. When will you come back? When you come back, Cymbidium, I still have a lot to say to you. Oh right, the teacher also said that you should report to him when you come back. After all, no one knows that you're a student of the Federal University. This wasn't a problem at all. Even if Li Tianlai hadn't said anything, Lu Feng still wanted to go to the Federal University. After all, Dao Songtian was his teacher and had helped him so much. He also wanted to learn from Dao Songtian. Now that he had advanced to the perfect stage and Wang Psychic Master, it was impossible for him to advance to the demigod stage in a short period of time. Therefore, what he needed to do now was to sort out his inner thoughts and slowly consolidate his current state. Lu Feng also remembered that Dao Songtian had told Lu Feng about the inter-school competition. After calculating the time carefully, it was about time. Lu Feng thought for a moment and said, Senior brother, let's wait a few days. I have to return to the Lu family in the next few days, because I still have an extremely important matter to do. After I'm done, I'll naturally go to the Cymbidium. Then, we'll go to the capital administrative planet and meet teacher. When Li Tianlai heard this, he didn't say anything more. Since Lu Feng was going to the Lu family, he really couldn't say anything more. Okay, Lu Feng, it's going to be the holidays soon. I'll wait for you here. Lu Feng nodded slightly and said a few more words to Li Tianlai with a smile. Finally, he ended the communication. Standing in the starry sky, Lu Feng thought of Mu Shiyan and the others again. For some reason, Lu Feng vaguely felt that their disappearance seemed to have something to do with him. Unfortunately, after thinking for a while, Lu Feng still couldn't think of anything. He decided not to think about it anymore. After a moment of silence, Lu Feng finally put this problem aside for the time being. After all, there were more important things to do now. He turned around and looked at the second ancestor apologetically. Lu Feng said, Second ancestor, it's Lu Feng's fault for making you wait here with me. When the second ancestor heard this, he smiled gently. At his current level, how could he care about such things? Of course, if Lu Feng wasn't Lu Feng, but someone else, the result would be different. Okay, I'm going to use the space jump. You have to experience it properly. After all, you now have the combat power of a deity. Now use it. At this moment, Lu Feng's body shook slightly. This was an expression of excitement. Yes, Lu Feng forgot. Because when he became a perfect stage warrior, everything was done like that. There wasn't any kind of extreme confrontation. After becoming a perfect stage warrior, Lu Feng's understanding of everything in his heart was only that he was strong. When he became a peak perfect stage warrior and a spirit master Wang, he might be able to dominate ordinary deities. However, Lu Feng had forgotten about other aspects. Among them, the biggest one was traveling through space and time. This was exclusive to deities. It was something that only deities could do. Lu Feng had actually forgotten about it. At this moment, when the second ancestor mentioned it, Lu Feng was naturally very excited. He took a deep breath and nodded vigorously. Chapter 5:15. In an instant, space was torn apart. Lu Feng could vaguely sense a way to use power. Compared to this, which was even harder to understand, Lu Feng could understand countless other immortal techniques very quickly. Therefore, he only needed a glance to understand the mystery of tearing apart the void. The second ancestor did not seem surprised that Lu Feng could understand everything so quickly. After all, Lu Feng was the Taboo King. If he was so stupid, he would not have been able to become the Taboo King. Lu Feng, I know you have already mastered it. However, if you slowly travel through space and time by yourself, you will not be able to return to the Human Race Federation for at least a few years. Therefore, it is better for you to follow me. Lu Feng nodded gently. If it had been any other time, He might have chosen to try it himself and travel a certain distance before deciding. However, when he thought of Yuyo and Qingran, Lu Feng was not in the mood to do this. In the next moment, the second ancestor used an earth-shattering ability to violently annihilate the space and time in front of him. Lu Feng used an unparalleled power to break open a space tunnel. After entering it, he would pass through all the restrictions of space and time and open it when he arrived at his destination. However, the second ancestor was different. He directly shattered everything violently, including the space and time of his destination. Then, he used an earth-shattering method to directly connect the space and time of the two places. In this way, the moment he walked from here, he would have crossed a distance of hundreds of millions of miles. In an instant, everything was realized. Lu Feng took a deep breath. This kind of spatial travel and usage was called spatial travel. Compared to the second ancestor, his so-called spatial travel was a complete joke. However, Lu Feng was not depressed. 2 years ago, he had been just an ant. Becoming a beginner martialist had been a dream. Now, he had reached such a level. Even a divine spirit powerhouse was no longer a match for him. Although he had yet to ignite his divine flame and condense a divine spark, Lu Feng was already a god. He was a real living god. Now that he had become a god, he would definitely surpass the second patriarch in the future and become the pinnacle of existence in the universe. My fate can't be controlled by anyone. Only I can control myself. The Aslan Black Hole community was located in a remote area of the universe. It was too far away from the Milky Way where the human race was located. If Lu Feng were to tear the space and come back step by step, then let alone a few years, he might not even succeed in a few decades. Fortunately, he had the second patriarch by his side. With the second Grandmaster's invincible power, he could travel through time and space as he pleased. In terms of speed, it was countless times faster than when he was traveling by himself. 2 hours later, they arrived at the Human Federation. Although he still couldn't see anything, Lu Feng felt a familiar fluctuation. It was a fluctuation on the spiritual level that could only be felt in the human race. There was an incomparably complicated expression on his face. Although Lu Feng had only been away from the human race for a little over a year in reality, more than 7 years had passed in reality. 7 years of time. He had only lived for 18 years. 7 years was really too long. A moment later, the space-time tunnel was completely opened. Lu Feng's heart skipped a beat as he gazed at the ancient, majestic building filled with a supreme aura. He recognized this place. Regardless of whether it was his childhood memories or everything he had seen the last time he had been here, Lu Feng was rather familiar with this place. This was the Human King planet. This was the birthplace of the Human King, the Lu family. It was also the planet of the Human King, the Lu family. Lu Feng, we are back. Seeing Lu Feng's rueful expression, the second ancestor also revealed a rueful expression. His voice awakened Lu Feng, who had been immersed in his memories. Lu Feng nodded his head gently. He followed the second patriarch and flew down from the void. The entire Human King planet had sensed the ripples that had ripped through the void earlier. Thus, countless members of the Lu family had gathered there. Of course, most of them were disciples of the collateral family. There were only a few true disciples of the direct line of descent. When they saw the second patriarch and the 12 supreme patriarchs appear, all the disciples knelt respectfully on the ground. Their faces were filled with absolute respect. "Welcome back, patriarchs." The second patriarch waved his arm gently and slowly lifted the many existences up. There was a look of pride in his eyes. "All right, you can all go do what you need to do." When they heard the second patriarch's words, many existences bowed respectfully again and slowly left the place. However, many people secretly cast their gazes at the second ancestor's side, where Lu Feng was. To these people, Lu Feng was extremely unfamiliar. Such a young existence had suddenly appeared. He had even been brought here by the second patriarch and was surrounded by so many patriarchs. How could these people not be surprised? However, they only glanced at him secretly. Although the Lu family was not like the other families, the rules of the tribe were not as strict as the rules of the other families. However, the prestige of the patriarch was still there. They did not dare to rashly provoke him. "All right, Lu Feng. Come with me to the final resting place of my tribe. I will convey your intentions to the patriarch." Lu Feng nodded his head gently. There was still a trace of apprehension in his eyes. After all, if he did not have the help of the Lu family, it would be too difficult for him to rescue Yuyo and Qingran. It was true that he had the battle strength of a divine spirit. However, such strength was nothing in the Yuyo family. If he wanted to rely on his own strength to accomplish this, he would at least need to become a virtual king. He might even need to reach the third or fourth level of the virtual king's strength. Perhaps for him, it wouldn't take too long for him to reach such a realm. However, Lu Feng did not want to wait. He really could not let Yuyo and Qingran continue to suffer like this. The second patriarch smiled gently when he saw the apprehension in Lu Feng's eyes. "Don't worry, Lu Feng. If the patriarchs do not agree, then the great patriarch and I will seek justice for you. The two of us can go anywhere in the universe." As he said that, a proud look appeared in the second patriarch's eyes. Indeed, he was the king of life and death. He belonged to the apex of the universe. He was not much weaker than the Spirit King. As for the great patriarch, he was in a mysterious realm. Although he could not fight against a supremacy or reach the level of a deviant path supremacy, the existence of the Divine King could not kill him. This realm was slightly higher than that of the Spirit King and the Divine King of Wind. Therefore, with the help of the two of them, the Yuyo family would not be too troublesome. Lu Feng was touched and nodded his head gently. In the next moment, the few of them descended from the void and appeared in the Human King Palace. Lu Feng's heart trembled slightly as he looked at the plain and ordinary ancient hall in front of him. He knew that the Human King Palace could not be compared to the famous existences in the universe in terms of majesty, vastness, and magnificence. It could not be compared to the Great Wilderness Totem, the Alchemy Center, or many other things that he had seen. However, this ordinary-looking building was a truly terrifying existence in the universe. The Human King had done his best to condense this terrifying hall, which could allow the Lu family to avoid the great calamity of the universe. Just this name alone was enough. It was completely enough. It had to be known that only the Great Wilderness Totem, a grade 12 weapon, had been able to withstand the great calamity of the universe. If the Human King Palace could be described in this way, it meant that it was not inferior to the Great Wilderness Totem at all. The last time I came here, I had to face the most ordinary evolutionary stage martial artist, and I had to fight to the death to barely survive. However, when I come here again, my strength has undergone an earth-shaking change. He had been on the brink of death the last time he had come here. At the time, he had almost perished while fighting against martialists. However, he was now billions of times stronger than he had been in the past. Evolution stage martialists only needed to release their supreme intent to kill countless martialists. Lu Feng followed the second patriarch and finally entered the Human King Palace. Lu Feng was sitting cross-legged in the Pure Lands, waiting for the final decision. There were only 3 figures beside him. These 3 were the Great Ancestor, the third patriarch, and the fourth patriarch. The other patriarchs had already returned to the Pure Lands and were in seclusion. To them, nothing in the world mattered anymore. They would rather spend all their time in seclusion and wait for the family to summon them. The second patriarch had already entered the deepest part of the Pure Lands and explained everything to the Lu family's first patriarch. As for Lu Feng, a decision had to be made as to whether the Lu family would appear. The great ancestor smiled faintly when he saw Lu Feng's slightly uneasy expression. You don't have to worry about anything, Lu Feng. The Lu family is the human monarch's Lu family. The human monarch is synonymous with hot-bloodedness in the current era. We, the Lu clan, will never give up or compromise because of some benefits. It's not just you. Even if it's a branch of the Lu family, as long as we care, we will still dare to oppose any power. Lu Feng nodded his head gently when he heard this. He knew that the great ancestor wasn't being hypocritical. After all, the Lu family was really such a family. The human monarch's Lu family was the most unshakable and terrifying power in the current era. This was recognized by the universe, and no one would deny it. Practically everyone in the current era who had heard of the existence of the human monarch's Lu family, regardless of whether they were from the human race or a foreign race, understood one of the characteristics of the Lu family. This characteristic was that they were extremely protective of their shortcomings. Of course, there were also prerequisites for this. As long as it didn't violate morality or violate the spirit of the Lu family wouldn't back down even when facing a peak overlord race. If it hadn't been for the Lu family's impartiality and Lu family's protectiveness, the Lu family would probably have been as mediocre as the other powers and wouldn't have had such a terrifying reputation in the universe. Chapter 5:16. I know, great ancestor. However, I really can't say anything about this. Lu Feng understood. Although he felt sorry for Yuyo Qingran, she was still a member of the Yuyo family. She had nothing to do with the Lu family. Therefore, if the Lu family acted rashly, it would go against the morals of the Lu family. Therefore, Lu Feng was worried that the Lu family wouldn't act. The great ancestor smiled gently. His eyes were filled with indescribable benevolence. Lu Feng, if I really can't make a decision on this matter, then we will do as your second ancestor said. I will act with him and your two patriarchs. In this world, even if it's a peak race, as long as there's no supreme divine king, the four of us won't be afraid at all. Looking at the grand ancestor, Lu Feng revealed a strange expression. The great ancestor's smile became even more benevolent. You don't have to be surprised. Although it's inconvenient for the Lu family to act, it doesn't mean it's inconvenient for us. For the sake of our blood relatives, we can be willful just this once. What can we do? You, Lu Feng, are our blood relatives. You share the most direct bloodline with us. We are all the people closest to you. As your closest elders, what can we do if we protect our own children and grandchildren and help them out once? Lu Feng was silent. He was extremely silent. At this moment, he really couldn't say anything. The only thing he could do was nod his head firmly. Time passed slowly. Lu Feng sat quietly in the same spot. At this moment, his heart was calm. After receiving the great ancestor's promise, Lu Feng didn't have to worry about anything. No matter how strong the Yuyo family was, there wouldn't be a supreme of the other path. Given the strength of the four patriarchs, no one in the current era could suppress them unless a supreme made a move. Finally, after waiting for 2 hours, the second patriarch appeared. At this moment, Lu Feng stood up from the ground. He looked at the second patriarch with an anxious expression. Although the great ancestor and second ancestor had said so, Lu Feng didn't want them to go against their family's wishes and do something they would regret. Lu Feng relaxed slightly when he saw the second grandmaster's smiling face. Second ancestor, what's the result? Second patriarch was still smiling. He gently waved his arm at Lu Feng, indicating that Lu Feng should not be so excited. Lu Feng nodded and stood there quietly. Looking at Lu Feng, the second ancestor fell silent for a moment before speaking. Lu Feng, the family's ancestors are very pleased with your performance. The primogenitor has agreed to your request this time. In an instant, Lu Feng revealed an extremely excited expression. The clan had agreed. This time, the Lu family was willing to make a move. They were willing to break off relations with the Yuyo family for his sake. When he saw Lu Feng's excited expression, the second patriarch added, "However, Lu Feng, things are not as simple as you think." Lu Feng nodded gently. He looked at the second patriarch and waited quietly for him to continue. The second patriarch didn't hesitate. "Although we don't mind if you act so overbearingly, it will still cause damage to the family's reputation. After all, Yuyo Qingran is a member of the Yuyo family. She has no relationship with the Lu family. There is no substantial relationship between you and her. Of course, if there is no other choice, we will still make a move." Lu Feng nodded gently. Indeed, the relationship between him and Yuyo Qingran was only a childhood promise. There was no relationship between the two families. Therefore, if they made a move, people would think that the Lu family was too overbearing and wanted to interfere in everything. However, there is an opportunity this time. An opportunity that the Yuyo family cannot refuse. The second patriarch pondered for a moment before a strange smile appeared on his face. "I'm afraid that when the Yuyo family made that promise, they would never have dreamed that you would appear in the Lu family. This is their mistake. About 10 years ago, when the Yuyo family's grand ancestor descended on the human king planet, there was an intense conflict between the younger generation of the Lu family and the younger generation of the Yuyo family. I think you should be able to understand a little about this." Lu Feng was silent for a moment before he nodded gently. Indeed, the younger generation of the Yuyo family had given Lu Feng a bad impression. The two people he had met were a genius and a demon from the Yuyo family. Both of them were lawless, arrogant, and ignorant. They had always looked down on the people of the Lu family, whose bloodline was thin. Thus, it was within their expectations that they would clash with the direct descendants of the Lu family. Of course, all of this had something to do with him. Back then, the younger generation had made an agreement. After 10 years, one of the younger generation of the two families would come out and represent the two families in a battle. Whichever family won could make a request of the other. As long as it did not go against the foundation of the family, they would have to agree. Even if the other party asked for a 9th-grade divine object, they would still have to agree. Lu Feng nodded gently. At this moment, a bright light appeared in his eyes. This was a glow of excitement. Lu Feng knew that the Yuyo family did not have good intentions when they had made this agreement. After all, Lu Feng had failed to awaken at that time, and the overall bloodline of the Lu family was extremely thin. The only genius and demon who could fight was the Dongwang Lu Luo. At that time, the Yuyo family must have believed that Lu Luo, who had lost the help of his bloodline, could not be compared to the Western Emperor Yuyo at all. Therefore, they had made such a rule. Now Lu Feng had appeared. Even after 10 years, he had reached the level that he was now, and was comparable to any of the younger generation's great achievements. This, on the other hand, was convenient for him. "Second Patriarch, I understand," he said. "This battle, I will not fail. Give me some time, and I will reach the pinnacle of the realm below the demigod realm. With my twin souls, I will face the Yuyo family. As long as his battle strength has not reached the true god realm, I will not be afraid of anything." Lu Feng was absolutely confident. Back then, he was only at the upheaval transformation stage and the peak of the spiritual psyche master. Under the limit of his battle strength, he could temporarily become a deity. Now that he had advanced by a large level, his ultimate slaughter was comparable to that of a true god. Hearing this, the second ancestor's eyes shone brightly. "Good. When you are complete, the 4 ancestors will personally appear and accompany you to fulfill the promise of the past." Lu Feng nodded fiercely. "Ancestor, give me 28 days. You can tell the Yuyo clan that in 28 days, I, Lu Feng, will be able to shake the entire galaxy." 28 days. This month's time had not been completed yet. In that case, Yu Qingran would not have to suffer any more pain. Therefore, no matter what, Lu Feng had to reach the pinnacle of the realm within these 28 days. The second ancestor nodded gently. Then, if you need anything in these 28 days, just say the word. The younger generation of the Lu family has been oppressed for 15 years. Now, it is time to seek justice. Lu Feng could clearly see the cold light in the eyes of the second ancestor, the great ancestor, and the other two ancestors. When the younger generation was young, these ancestors did not care much. However, those were their direct bloodline. How could they act as if nothing had happened when their own bloodline was being bullied? Now Lu Feng had appeared. Then, the younger generation of the Lu family would truly return to the pinnacle of the universe's younger generation. 28 days was not a long time. Of course, it was not a small amount. To reach the pinnacle of the universe in 28 days was undoubtedly extremely difficult. However, this was also something Lu Feng had calculated long ago. Lu Feng did not walk out of the Pure Land. He chose to enter the path of inheritance. What Lu Feng needed now was to comprehend the chapters of the Human King's scripture regarding Heavenly King Dong and Human King Dong as soon as possible. Moreover, Lu Feng wanted to use the path of inheritance to raise his understanding of the martial way to the level of force. Lu Feng was confident that with his current comprehension ability, these comprehensions would not be too difficult. Sure enough, after only staying in the inheritance for 11 days, Lu Feng completed the comprehension of force and all the comprehension of Heavenly King Dong and Human King Dong. This kind of speed made the four old ancestors feel horrified. In their calculations, it would probably take at least 2 months for Lu Feng to comprehend all these. However, they did not expect that Lu Feng's comprehension ability was actually terrifying to such an extent. Looking at Lu Feng's figure consolidating with his eyes tightly shut, the second ancestor sighed deeply. Back then, when we said that Lu Feng failed and spent a lot of time to comprehend substance, I think we were all wrong back then. I'm afraid that the substance that Lu Feng comprehended back then was not just one type. I'm afraid he has comprehended all 10 types of quality. The great ancestor smiled and nodded. He believed that with the heaven-defying aptitude that Lu Feng displayed now, this must have been the case back then. Lu Feng's existence is too inconceivable. Back then, my ancestor, the Human King, finally stepped onto the path when he was at the peak of his life. However, Lu Feng has already completed it. It seems that our Human King, the Lu family, is destined to have our strongest voice in this era. Everyone agreed with the second ancestor's words. A day's time passed again. Finally, Lu Feng slowly opened his eyes. Looking at the 4 figures beside him, Lu Feng bowed respectfully. Ancestor, I'm done, plain, incomparably plain. One had to know that regardless of whether it was comprehending the contents of the Wang Dong chapter of the Human King scripture or comprehending the existence of intent, it was something that was enough to make any monstrous genius excited. However, this matter was so easy and natural for Lu Feng. It was as if this was nothing at all. Although the 4 great ancestors felt strange in their hearts, they didn't show it on their faces. They nodded their heads lightly. Lu Feng, we have prepared everything you need. The Lu family also has the time realm. It's just that our Lu family's time realm is relatively small. However, it's definitely enough for you to cultivate. Upon hearing this, a strange look appeared in Lu Feng's eyes. Previously, he had told the great ancestors that he needed to enter the time realm to cultivate for a period of time in order to evolve everything about him to the peak. Back then, he had thought of the Federal University's time realm. Lu Feng also understood that, given his status as Dao Songtian's disciple, it was simply not difficult for him to enter the time realm. Therefore, he had hoped that the Lu family could get one of the great ancestors to quickly send him to the capital administrative planet. However, Lu Feng hadn't expected that the Lu family would also have the time realm. In that case, everything would be easy to handle. In that case, Lu Feng won't hesitate anymore. Ancestor, please send Lu Feng into the time realm. I want to cultivate for a period of time in the time realm to improve my comprehension and my cultivation as a psychic to the peak. The great ancestor nodded gently and directly led Lu Feng out of the pure land of bliss and into the Lu family's time realm. Chapter 5:17. The Lu family's time realm couldn't compare to the time realm of the Federal University. After all, the Federal University's time realm was basically a continent of time. Besides the Emperor family, there seemed to be no other place in the world that could compare to the Federal University. Furthermore, the Lu family's time realm also had a shortcoming. It was basically the same as the time realm of the foreign battlefield. Every time one wanted to use it, they would have to spend a lot of resources. Of course, these resources were nothing to the Lu family. Compared to the foreign battlefields, the time acceleration of the Lu family's time realm was much higher. After all, the highest acceleration level there was 50 times. 50 times was more than enough for Lu Feng to use. Lu Feng stayed in the time realm for 2 days. 2 days was equivalent to 100 days in the time realm. During these 100 days, Lu Feng had already taken elixirs and raised his telekinesis grade completely. While he was on the second level of the sky-piercing Fudu, he had also raised his martial path comprehension to the highest level. While cultivating on the second level, Lu Feng could vaguely sense that he should be able to enter the third level. However, when he thought about the urgency of time, he still chose not to enter. Lu Feng had a vague feeling that if he were to enter the third level this time, it would take a very long time. It wouldn't be long before Yuyo and Qingran would suffer the same treatment again. Naturally, Lu Feng wouldn't enter the third level. 2 days later, Lu Feng returned to the Pure Land of Bliss. Now, 14 days have passed. There are only 14 days left before the competition begins. The Grand Ancestor's voice also carried a slightly strange tone. During this time, they could clearly sense Lu Feng's progress. Therefore, they were also looking forward to this competition. After all, the Lu family had been suppressed too miserably in the past 15 years. The significance of this battle is not only because of the Netherfeather family, but also because of the billions of young people in the universe. The Lu family wanted to let these people know that the human king's Lu family had never withered. Now, it was the era of the human king and Lu family's rise. And in the future, a new terror would appear. The imperial Lu family would become even more dazzling. There are still 14 days left. Lu Feng, how do you plan to use this time? Others might not have understood, but Second Patriarch vaguely understood Lu Feng's plan. Previously, he had heard from Lu Mu that Lu Feng's cultivation method required endless tribulations to break through. Before the battle with the Demon King's clone, Lu Feng had also done something crazy in order to quickly improve and break through. During the battle with the Demon King, the entire universe witnessed Lu Feng's crazed terror for the first time. Therefore, he had already guessed Lu Feng's next choice. Sure enough, Lu Feng started asking questions. Patriarchs, may I ask if there is an extremely dangerous environment around our Lu clan? It is an area full of danger. Once my cultivation method breaks through the limits of a major realm, the limits of a minor realm will be a joke. As long as there is enough training, I can easily advance. In 14 days, as long as the environment is sufficient, I can definitely raise my cultivation level to the peak of perfection. I wonder if you know of such a place. They all had a vague understanding of the uniqueness of Lu Feng's cultivation method. Therefore, they were not too surprised by Lu Feng's words. Second Patriarch smiled faintly. I knew you planned to do so. Therefore, after returning, I have already found the place you need. 14 days. Lu Feng and Second Patriarch had disappeared for a total of 14 days. When Lu Feng returned in 14 days, His entire body was emitting a supreme and terrifying aura. This was the feeling of being at the peak of perfection. One could clearly sense an aura of destruction from Lu Feng's body. When the great ancestor sensed the aura from Lu Feng's body, a slightly strange expression appeared on his face. However, when he looked at the second ancestor, he was momentarily stunned. This was because the great ancestor actually saw a look of reverence in second patriarch's eyes. During these 14 days, Lu Feng had been quietly cultivating in an extremely terrifying environment. This environment was a world filled with an aura of destruction. This was a planet that was about to die. It was violently disintegrating, and there was only a short amount of time left. The planet was filled with all kinds of terrifying calamities. Even a demigod would find it difficult to survive in this calamity and would be annihilated in a moment. However, Lu Feng had performed one miracle after another. Every time Lu Feng fell, it seemed as if he would never be able to get up again. But he would stand up again and again. This craziness deeply shocked the second patriarch, who was an unrivaled almighty. From this moment on, the second patriarch no longer had any doubts about Lu Feng's future prospects. He knew that Lu Feng had such astonishing aptitude and terrifying willpower. Thus, all the obstacles to reaching the peak in the future no longer existed. As long as Lu Feng was willing, any peak would no longer be a peak. Finally, on the 14th day, Lu Feng broke through one barrier after another and reached the next peak of his life. Countless disciples of the Lu family had gathered on the plaza and were quietly waiting for the patriarch to appear. They were very puzzled. They did not understand why the patriarch had gathered them all. However, since the patriarch had summoned them, they had to appear. Time passed quickly, and it was noon. At this moment, 4 figures slowly appeared on the square. When the disciples saw the 4 figures in the sky above the square, all of them were completely stunned. They had thought that the patriarch who had summoned them was just an ordinary patriarch. However, when they saw the 4 figures, they realized that they had been wrong. They had been completely wrong. It's actually the 4 patriarchs, the great patriarch and the other 3 patriarchs were the publicly recognized 4 supreme patriarchs of the Lu family. They were also the 4 supreme elders of the Lu family. Although they had not appeared for hundreds or thousands of years, in everyone's opinion, the 4 of them were the pillars of the Lu family. Any one of them was enough to represent the existence of the Lu family. When the 4 of them appeared at the same time, it symbolized the ultimate manifestation of the Lu family's will. The great patriarch, who was floating quietly in the air and watching the countless clansmen, smiled with satisfaction. Although many disciples of the direct line of descent had had their blood extracted, causing their own bloodlines to become thin, the same was true for the side branches. However, to the side branches, this didn't have much of an impact. Therefore, their strength was still incomparably terrifying in this era. Among all the side branches of the Divine King family, the Lu family was still considered the most powerful. After a moment of silence, the great patriarch's voice rang out slowly. This time, I have gathered all of you here to announce some things. Nobody said anything. The great patriarch's will was the will of the Lu family. Nobody dared raise any objections when he spoke. Sweeping his gaze over the crowd, the great patriarch's voice spread clearly to every corner of the human king planet. The candidate for the current young master of the Lu family has been decided. Do you all know who he is? All the disciples remained silent. They just stood quietly where they were. They naturally knew who the great patriarch was talking about. A long time ago, the Lu family had already announced that Lu Feng would be the current young master of the Lu family. In fact, he would be the most respected young master in the history of the Lu family. Unfortunately, Lu Feng's existence was really unfamiliar to most of the children of the Lu family. In the past, these people wouldn't have cared at all about who the young master was. However, things were different this time. Many of the children of the Lu family's side branches already had another candidate in mind. He was also an evildoer. He was the Emperor of Slaughter, whose name shook the galaxy. He was Lu Luo of the Dongwang Empire. When the younger generation of the Lu family had withered away, he had relied on his own strength to raise the hopes of the Lu family. It could be said that in the hearts of the younger generation, Lu Luo was fully deserving of the title of young master. After all, everyone had seen and remembered everything he had done for the younger generation of the Lu family. In comparison, Lu Feng was just a person with an empty reputation who hadn't made any actual contributions. He wouldn't be of any help to them. Of course, it was normal for most people to think this way. After all, given their status, they had no way of coming into contact with those big secrets. At the very least, they had no way of knowing anything that had happened to Lu Feng in the foreign battlefield. Although this was the case for the majority, there were always some exceptions. There were also some members of the Lu family who vaguely knew about Lu Feng's existence. Even though they only knew a little about Lu Feng, they still knew a little about him. However, these small details were enough to terrify them. These people all understood that Lu Feng was known as the Emperor of the East, while Lu Feng was the Emperor of the East. One was a young emperor, while the other was a young paragon. The difference between the two was just too big. These people who understood everything were naturally overjoyed by Lu Feng's return. After all, Lu Feng's return as the young master of the Lu family meant that in the future, the Lu family would continue to be invincible. In the chaotic galaxy of the future, the human king's Lu family would definitely be the most powerful family. Seeing the strange expressions of the people below, the Grand Ancestor only smiled softly. These people's reactions were also within his expectations. However, the Grand Ancestor wasn't worried about anything. He knew that as long as Lu Feng released his own prestige, even the Divine King would have to acknowledge his status. He had never doubted this point. From today onwards, the young master of the Lu family is Lu Feng, and he has the same authority as the family head. The family head of the Lu family is in charge of all the power of the family. And the young master Lu Feng is in charge of the Elders' Council. Chapter 518. At this moment, everyone was dumbfounded. They looked at the Grand Ancestor in the void with disbelief in their eyes. Controlling the Council of Elders. Was that even possible? Was that even possible? What kind of existence was the Council of Elders? It was the Lu family's final trump card. It might not be of much use during normal times, but at the most critical moment, the Council of Elders would be the one to decide everything. All along, the leadership of the Elders' Council had always been held by one of the four Grand Elders. Even the Lu family's patriarch did not have the right to do so. But now, they had actually given the supreme authority to control the Lu family's Council of Elders to Lu Feng. This was too shocking and terrifying. The authority of the Patriarch to control the Council of Elders. If he already controls the Council of Elders, he might even be able to abolish the Patriarch's position at the most critical moment. Is that the same as the Patriarch? He's completely above the Patriarch's authority. Patriarchs, what exactly are you thinking? What are they trying to do? No one dared to raise a ruckus or question the Grand Ancestor's decision. They could only communicate, discuss, and express the horror in their hearts through voice transmissions. The Grand Ancestor glanced at them but did not say anything else. Then, he and the other three Grand Ancestors flew toward the Human King Hall. When the four Grand Patriarchs disappeared, another figure appeared in the void. The moment they saw this figure, many existences once again bowed respectfully. Greetings, Patriarch. The figure in the sky was the Lu family's current Patriarch. He was also the Lu family's great-grandfather and Lu Sharon's father. He had been in seclusion for a few years and had never participated in any of the family's decisions. Of course, the family's decisions did not require his participation. And now, when the time limit of 10 years had arrived, He had finally appeared, one step after another. Every step he took was like the solidification of time and space. It was as if heaven and earth were being replaced. Time and space seemed to be retreating. This was the majesty of a king. Moreover, it was not the glory and majesty of an ordinary king. This was actually a peerless king. Lu Feng's great-grandfather, the head of the Lu family, was actually a peerless almighty. He was a virtual king that was at least above the Tier 5 virtual king realm. Shocking the world, shocking the world. After all, Lu Feng's great-grandfather was only a little over 100 years old. The patriarch of the Lu family, on the other hand, had become a peerless great ancestor of the various races during this period of time. Terrifying, truly incomparably terrifying. Given his aptitude, he was at least the emperor of massacre. Perhaps he was even at the pinnacle of the emperor of massacre. Plus, this family head definitely had an extreme martial intent. Otherwise, even if the Lu family's resources were abundant, he wouldn't have been able to reach the almighty realm in such a short time. After a few steps, he was already standing in the void. His might was completely unleashed at this moment. Although he was far from being a match for the great ancestor in terms of strength, the might of the Lu family's patriarch was unparalleled and terrifying. He stood there quietly, the condensation of countless heroic souls of the Lu family's countless years. His existence was a supreme, noble existence. As he swept his gaze over the crowd, his might started to spread. Everyone who felt the gaze of the head of the Lu clan unconsciously lowered their heads. No matter how noble they usually were, no matter how much power they usually held, they had to stand respectfully at this moment and look at the person who held the most power in the world with reverence. At the moment, they couldn't even use voice transmissions. They could only stand quietly on the spot with their heads lowered and wait for everything to happen. Finally, after a round of scanning, the Lu family's patriarch's voice was heard. This time, Lu Feng has become the young master of the Lu family and enjoyed many special privileges. This was decided by many of the Lu family's patriarchs. Anyone can voice their objections, but we don't care. Domineering. This was incomparably domineering. No matter who he faced, he would always be incomparably domineering. This was the patriarch of the Lu family. You can disagree. You can have your own opinions. Unfortunately, I don't care. I don't care how dissatisfied or dissatisfied you are. I won't pay any attention to you. Lu Feng is the young master. The few of us have already decided that he is the young master. Therefore, even if anyone has any objections, they can't sway us. They can't change anything. Below, there was still silence. Absolute silence. Everyone knew the patriarch of the Lu family's character. After all, it was universally acknowledged. This patriarch was the most domineering patriarch in the history of the Lu family. As he looked at the many descendants, the patriarch of the Lu family nodded gently and spoke again. I know that you don't understand our decision. You think that a freak like him shouldn't be able to enjoy such treatment. Many of you think the same. This young master position should belong to Lu Luo. The patriarch of the Lu family didn't beat around the bush. He directly said what was on everyone's mind. None of them denied his directness. Another distinctive characteristic of the Lu family was their straightforwardness. They were very simple and straightforward when it came to matters. The patriarch of the Lu family smiled faintly and swept his gaze over the crowd again. Then, he said, Lu Luo is not bad. When the younger generation of the Lu family was dying out, I managed to preserve the dignity of the Lu family. However, he was unable to lead the Lu family to the pinnacle. He was unable to help the Lu family regain the unrivaled dignity of our ancestors during the era of the human monarch. He can't. I can't. The ancestors of the Lu family can't either. Even. At this point, the Lu family's clan head paused for a moment. Then, he said something even more shocking. Even the ancestors of the Lu family can't do it either. This time, the crowd was in an uproar. Countless people were shocked into an uproar. They had never imagined that the patriarch of the Lu family would actually say something like this in public. This was simply world-shaking, incomparably world-shaking. Countless discussions broke out all around. However, the patriarch of the Lu family remained calm in the face of all this. In the human monarch hall, the great ancestor smiled faintly when he heard this. However, this smile wasn't one of mockery or ridicule. It was a doting smile. Xiaoshunzi is still as insolent as ever. He likes to say things that shock people. The name of the current patriarch of the Lu family was Lu Shun. The second patriarch also smiled and nodded his head gently. Neither you nor I are suitable to become the patriarch of the Lu family. Only Lu Shun is suitable. He has worked hard all these years. Although he has worked hard, his temper is still the same. He is just too impulsive. If it weren't for Lu Feng, I'm afraid that he would still regret his decision on the day of his death. The third patriarch nodded his head gently. Back then, we all thought very highly of Shaoran. Unfortunately, he broke the family rules. Of course, if he was willing to admit his mistake, he would at most receive some punishment. Are we really going to break them up? The Lu family is not afraid of the Sky Dao race. However, Lu Shun is just too impulsive. He actually expelled his own child from the family. If it weren't for Lu Feng's help, I'm afraid that Lu Shun would have spent the rest of his life in endless regret. The few of them nodded their heads gently. If it hadn't been for Lu Feng, how could Lu Shaoran have returned? So this time, Lu Shun said those words. In addition to showing Lu Feng's status, it was also to repay Lu Feng's kindness. When they heard what Lu Shun had said, many people simply couldn't stay calm. They exchanged glances and saw the shock in each other's eyes. They couldn't believe that Lu Feng had actually been treated this way by the Lu family. The Lu family's head couldn't do it. The patriarch couldn't do it. The 4 high patriarchs couldn't do it. Even the supreme grade ancestor couldn't do it. Everyone else couldn't do it, but Lu Feng could. Lu Shun didn't say anything. He wanted to wait for these people to calm down. This was because he knew that what he had just said was too shocking. After a long time, the discussion didn't stop. Instead, it became even more intense. Finally, someone who knew of Lu Feng's existence spoke up. Actually, the family head is right. Everyone looked over at the same time. However, when they saw the identity of the person who had spoken, they fell silent. They were waiting for an explanation. The person who had spoken wasn't someone with a very high status. However, what he knew was incomparable to what these people knew. This person was a member of the Lu family's intelligence center. He was in charge of organizing information. Therefore, he knew a lot of things. What do you mean, Lu Yuan? Is Lu Feng really that terrifying? The few people around them didn't say anything, but that didn't mean that everyone else was silent. Finally, someone who wasn't convinced spoke up. He wanted to hear the truth that would convince them. Lu Yuan was silent for a moment. A moment later, a look of reverence and fanaticism appeared on his face. When they saw this, the other members of the Lu family exchanged glances. Just thinking about one person's past achievements made them have such an expression. This was undoubtedly inconceivable. At this moment, many people vaguely felt that this Lu Feng seemed to be really that terrifying. Others might not know about the Battle of Young Master's Rise, but as someone who specializes in collecting and organizing information, I am incomparably clear about it. His first battle was in the Cymbidium. At the time, he was only a mid-grade warrior. However, his opponent was a martialist, a true martialist. At the time, the young master relied on his unparalleled willpower to actually defeat a martialist. Chapter 519. In an instant, everyone had strange expressions on their faces. Among the ranks of warriors, one's cultivation level was not very obvious. However, to defeat a martialist at the level of a mid-level warrior was undoubtedly a freak. The only freak in the Lu family was Lu Luo himself. He was the Emperor of Massacre, a freak at the peak of the Fifth Order Emperor realm. Someone looked at Lu Yuan and said disdainfully, "He has the bloodline of our younger generation. It is not surprising that he can do this. If young Master Lu Luo also had the bloodline, he would definitely catch up with Lu Tao and become the second king of Massacre in the Lu family's history." Lu Yuan smiled coldly when he heard these words, which were filled with disdain and defiance. "If you really think so, then you're making a big mistake. Did you know? The young master was 16 years old at the time." 16 years old? In an instant, some people who knew a little about Lu Feng reacted. They seemed to have thought of something, and their faces were filled with shock and disbelief. However, there were also some people who seemed to be born to look at Lu Feng with disdain. Therefore, they were still mocking him. 16 years old? A 16-year-old mid-level warrior? Ha 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 ha. This is hilarious. He has the bloodline of the Lu family, yet he is only a mid-level warrior at the age of 16? What a joke. He is already 18 years old this year. I reckon he hasn't even broken through to become a martialist yet. What's the use of having such a freak? He is simply tarnishing the bloodline of the human monarch Lu family. These mocking voices rang out continuously, but Lu Yuan did not seem to care. His face was filled with indifference. He did not stop. Instead, he continued, "In the following days the young master kept breaking through. In the massacre abyss, he shocked everyone and suppressed everyone with his supreme power. In 3 days, he went from the son of Massacre to the position of the Emperor of Massacre. When he was bestowed the title of Emperor, he called himself the Emperor. Many high-level warriors of the Emperor of Massacre did not submit to him. Then, he single-handedly battled 5 emperors of Massacre of the same level. In an instant, all the people who had mocked Lu Feng shut their mouth. Their eyes were filled with a strong sense of shock. Fighting against 5 slaughter emperors of the same level all by himself. Not to mention whether or not he had such strength, just this courage alone was enough to make him a supreme being in this world. That battle ended in a draw. However, everyone once said that if the young master had used all his trump cards, then the 5 emperors of slaughter would not have been his match. Then, the young master went to the Tianyun galaxy and met the young master of the Mu clan. The young master of the Mu clan was a monstrous genius, but he used his terrifying power to suppress the young master of the Mu clan, who was at a higher level than him. However, young master was attacked by a supreme martial artist and his whereabouts are unknown. At that time, the Federation was in an uproar. All the pinnacle existences of the universe were in an uproar. Just when everyone thought that the young master had fallen, he appeared in the Outland battlefield. That time, he once again made the entire universe go crazy for him. Some people knew about these things. However, most of the existences were completely unknown. When they heard this, it was as if they were listening to a miracle. At this moment, everyone was no longer unconvinced about Lu Feng. With these experiences, he could even become the young master of the Lu family. In the Outland battlefield, he faced the crown prince of the Heavenly Dao clan, Wang Qingyun. That battle shocked the world. Since then, the Battle of the Kings has begun. Countless existences sucked in a breath of cold air when they heard this. They knew about the existence of the Battle of the Kings, but they did not know that it was their young master who had started it. Then what happened? Did the young master win or lose? The Battle of the Kings had begun. What a great honor this was! Everyone wanted to know the final result of Lu Feng's battle. Lu Yuan smiled gently with a strong sense of pride. Young Master Lu Feng is unparalleled in this world. Unparalleled in this world. How could he lose? After he succeeded, he hid everything and transformed into the psychic master evildoer Futu. With the identity of a peerless evildoer on the path of alchemy, he defeated the immortal king in the century-old age of alchemists. Then, as Fudu, he fought hundreds of evildoers and geniuses from various clans who were stronger than him. In the end, he used a supreme immortal technique and killed hundreds of evildoers and geniuses in one go. In the following days, the young master continued to break through and challenged the king of Taboo, the Demon King. In the same place, he defeated the Demon King with his peak power. Since then, the young master has been recognized as the King of Taboo in the universe. He is the King of Taboo who has surpassed the 7th stage of the epic evildoer. Now, the young master's aptitude has surpassed the heavenly king and his father, the King of Slaughter, Lu Tao. 2 years ago, he was on the verge of death in order to kill an evolutionary stage martial artist. Now, he is an invincible existence below the immortal level. The young master only used less than 2 years. Who can't be convinced by such an existence? Who can be unconvinced? At this moment, Lu Yuan's voice was slightly louder, full of excitement. Everyone who was questioned by him had completely shut their mouth. No matter how many problems they had, they couldn't say anything at this moment. At this moment, they finally understood what the Lu family head, Lu Shun, meant when he said those words. Yes, if they wanted to revive the Human King's Lu family and let the Human King's Lu family rule the universe again, they couldn't do it. Only Lu Feng could. Looking at the dull and silent expressions of those who had mocked him before, Lu Yuan suddenly laughed. Lu Yuan suddenly laughed. His laughter was full of ridicule and disdain. Lu Feng became the young master of the Lu family, not because the Lu family took pity on him, but because he has the strength to make the Lu family change all the rules. He is unparalleled in the world. No one could say anything to refute this. Lu Feng's experience in the past 2 years was definitely comparable to or even surpassing the Human King's experience in the past. The Human King had already become a godly existence when he was 17 years old. However, Lu Feng's speed of advancement had already surpassed the Human King's. It could be said that in Lu Yuan's opinion, Lu Feng was already close to being comparable to the Human King's ancestors. This kind of existence could bear all forms of appellation. Lu Yuan took a deep breath and gazed at the indifferent figure of the Lu family head in the sky. There was a faint look of worship in his eyes. He knew that it wasn't easy to be like Lu Shun and hand over authority to his great-grandson so easily. However, he had let go just like that. This was also a kind of great willpower. The young master has many more legendary experiences. There are some things that even I don't know about. After all, these things were handled by the old ancestor at the very least. His legends are even more terrifying than these. Think about it. Lu Feng has become the young master. What right do you have to question him? Similar explanations kept appearing in the square. Lu Shun quietly floated in the air. His expression didn't change in the slightest. He knew that if Lu Feng's matter was exposed, no one would question his existence anymore. After a long time, the square finally quieted down. No one said anything else. Everyone was incomparably silent as they quietly looked at Lu Shun. Seeing this scene, Lu Shun smiled gently. He slowly opened his mouth and said, "I don't think you're questioning young Master Lu Feng's qualifications." Everyone was silent. After hearing such a story, how could they dare to question Lu Feng's identity as the young master? Lu Shun glanced around and continued speaking. "Actually, besides announcing Lu Feng's identity and authority, I've gathered all of you here for an even more important matter. It's about the agreement from 10 years ago. An agreement between the Human King's Lu family and Emperor Yu Yu's bloodline." Hearing this, a glimmer of light appeared in the eyes of many existences. They didn't know about the existence of the agreement. It was because they heard the name of Emperor Yu Yu's bloodline. Over the years, although the Emperor Yu Yu's family was far from the human king's bloodline in terms of strength. However, they relied on the favor that the former Emperor Divine King gave the human king to suppress the Lu family. As the Lu family with the greatest bloodline inheritance since ancient times, how could they be willing to be suppressed like this? Now that they heard this, many existences seemed to realize that something they hoped for was about to happen. Most of you don't know what happened 10 years ago. You also don't know about the agreement at that time. Now I'll tell you about it here. 10 years ago, the old ancestor of the Yu Yu's family made an agreement with the great ancestor. It was an agreement regarding a battle between the younger generation. 10 years later, which is today, the Yu Yu's family will produce a monstrous genius that will fight against a monstrous genius of my Lu family. The winner will receive a request. This is the content of the battle. The content was simple, but these people weren't idiots. They naturally knew that the real situation wouldn't be so simple. What was involved in this was definitely something very big. If it was in the past, they might be worried. After all, the strongest existence of the Lu family's younger generation was the Eastern Emperor Lu Luo. Although Lu Luo was the Emperor of Slaughter, his talent was heaven-defying. Because of the problem of his bloodline, he was definitely weaker than West Earth Emperor Rome. Therefore, this battle boded ill rather than well. But now it was different, because the Lu family had produced a taboo monarch. A taboo monarch that could make billions of races tremble, Lu Feng. His existence would lead the human King Lu clan back to the peak of the world. Fight. 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 No one knew when, but when someone shouted the word fight, everyone shouted the same word in unison. They had been suppressed for countless years. It was time for them to do something. Lu Yuan's face was filled with calmness. However, anyone could see the vigorous fighting spirit in the depths of Lu Yuan's eyes. Fight. That is to fight. If they want to fight, we will fight. When has the human King Lu family ever been afraid of fighting? Where is Lu Feng? Terrifying voices echoed between heaven and earth in an instant. In the next moment, everyone quieted down. It was also at this moment that the human king hall slowly opened. A figure slowly walked out of the ancient hall, bringing with him endless glory and prosperity. He brought with him a kind of supreme power that shocked the world and made everyone tremble. Lu Feng is here. His indifferent voice was unable to conceal that supreme battle intent, unable to cover up that matchless majesty. Lu Feng had finally appeared in front of the countless members of the Lu family. With a light step, he appeared beside Lu Shun as if he had crossed the limit of time and space. Seeing this, the pupils of many god-level existences of the Lu family constricted. Their eyes were filled with astonishment. These people naturally understood that what Lu Feng used just now was the profound mystery of space. In order to use this kind of profound mystery, one must have the strength of a god. In other words, the current Lu Feng had the strength of a god. How many years has it been? How many years has it been? It didn't seem to be 2 years. 2 years ago, Lu Feng was nothing. But now, he had become an existence with the strength of a god. This was too terrifying, too heaven-defying. Many existences knew that Lu Feng had passed his childhood. Although he still couldn't use many items, as a god, as long as he wore a kind of crystal that could rapidly shatter the void, it would be impossible to kill him, unless it was a real King Realm expert who wanted to kill him. Lu Feng, who had the strength of a god in his childhood, had really reached the realm of great success. Looking at the incomparably calm Lu Feng in the sky, Lu Shun's eyes were filled with an incomparably strange expression. The emotions contained within were incomparably complicated and incomprehensible. After a while, he sighed softly. Then, a solemn and majestic expression appeared on his face again. Lu Feng, do you have the confidence to win this battle? Lu Feng looked at Lu Shun quietly. After a while, a dazzling brilliance suddenly appeared at the corner of his mouth. At this moment, he was the only center between heaven and earth. His will represented unparalleled greatness and unparalleled majesty. There is no other way. I will definitely win. These 4 simple words expressed Lu Feng's determination and showed Lu Feng's attitude. As long as he appeared in this battle, he would definitely win. He would definitely win. He would definitely win. Other than this, there was no other possibility. Chapter 520. This was Lu Feng's promise, as well as Lu Feng's determination. In the eyes of outsiders and ordinary people, this battle only concerned the glory of the Lu family. However, to Lu Feng, this battle concerned her very existence. For her sake, Lu Feng had to win. He could only win. Evidently, Lu Shun also understood Lu Feng's confidence and determination to win. A satisfied smile hung from the corners of his mouth. Nodding his head gently, Lu Shun said slowly, "In that case, the Lu family's candidate for this battle against the Yuyo family will be you, Lu Feng." This time, the Lu family didn't send many people from the Yuyo family. However, their lineup was unprecedentedly strong. The 4 ancestral patriarchs had all made their move. The head of the Lu family had also appeared. More than 10 ancestral patriarchs, who were stronger than the virtual king, had stepped forward. As for ancestral patriarchs, there were more than 1,000 of them. The reason the Lu family had sent out such a terrifying lineup wasn't just to support Lu Feng. It was also to announce something. The human monarch Lu family had made a mighty return. From now on, the Lu family would no longer endure silently. They wanted to display their former peak majesty and unparalleled dominance in the universe. A team of more than 1,000 people majestically traversed through the void, causing a lot of commotion and waking up all the divine beings in the region. However, no one dared to ask about it because such a lineup was enough to severely injure an ordinary peak overlord race if no supremes were to appear. The entire human race was in an uproar. Many entities that had received the news rushed frantically towards the Emperor Star System's Emperor Star. These people were all aware of the old grudge between the Yuyo family and the human monarch Lu family. They all understood that the Lu clan had mobilized such a terrifying lineup this time around. It was definitely not just because of the legendary promise from 10 years ago. Ancient powerhouses walked out of the Federal University on the capital administrative planet. They were also rushing towards the Emperor Star System's Emperor Star System. It was reasonable for the Federation government to send experts over. After all, in the Federation government represented the orthodoxy. This was equivalent to the existence of the dynasties of the various races. However, the appearance of such a strong person at the Federal University was suspicious. Most of the time, the Federal University was extremely silent. Even when the demons invaded the human race in the past, the Federal University was extremely silent. Although everyone knew that the Federal University didn't appear not because of cowardice, but because it wasn't time yet. That was because their personalities were like that. The existence of the telekinesis masters was indifferent. They didn't really care about such a battle for supremacy. But this time, there were actually so many existences that had awakened to watch this battle. This caused many existences to be shocked. However, even though they were surprised, they didn't worry about it. After all, the thing that received the most attention was Emperor Lu Feng, the confrontation between Yu Yu's line and the human king's line. In just half a day, countless existences had awakened and were all rushing towards the Emperor's star. The number of human powerhouses that had appeared this time was shocking. However, in the minds of these people, there wasn't the slightest bit of suspense in this battle. After all, Emperor Lu Feng was indeed terrifying. He was able to defeat a demon king that was a small level higher than him. However, his limit hadn't broken through to the deity level. A month ago, he had used the battle as an opportunity to break through to the upheaval stage. In that case, it was impossible for Lu Feng to break through within a month. As for the young master of the Yu family, West Earth Emperor Rong Yu, it was said that he had at least reached the demigod level 2 realm. In addition to his existence as the Emperor of Massacre, Lu Feng had no chance of winning against West Earth Emperor Rong. However, that was the case in theory. Nevertheless, many existences still came here. This was because they also hoped to see Lu Feng create another miracle. This was because all along Lu Feng's victories had been piled up by countless miracles. This time, even though there was such a huge gap in strength, they still hoped to see another miracle. After half a day, there were no less than 100,000 deity-level powerhouses gathered outside the Emperor's star. Such a number was absolutely horrifying. Back then, the human race had only announced that there were 50 deity-level powerhouses. However, there were more than 100,000 deity-level powerhouses outside the Emperor's star. This was 2,000 times the number on the surface. Furthermore, everyone knew that the number of deity-level powerhouses of the human race was much, much higher than that. Once all the deity-level powerhouses of the human race appeared, the number of deity-level powerhouses would be many times greater than what it was now. This was the terrifying power of the former number 1 race of the present era. The deity-level powerhouses and many other existences that had come here were all here for the opportunity to witness this battle. Therefore, they had arrived much earlier than Lu Feng and the others. By the time Lu Feng and hundreds of Lu family patriarchs arrived, the entire periphery of the Emperor's star was filled with countless terrifying majestic auras. God-level existences did not need to descend at all to see everything that was happening on the planet. Moreover, the Emperor's star would not allow ordinary deity-level powerhouses to descend at will. After all, God-level existences could easily destroy a star in the universe. Slowly, the void was torn apart and thousands of existences finally walked out of the vast void crack. Their auras were unparalleled, and their majestic auras were unparalleled. The appearance of thousands of Lu family patriarchs shocked the void. These patriarchs were at least God-level existences, and the most powerful among them were the virtual king realm patriarchs. Any one of these existences was enough to shake a part of the universe. This time there was far more than one of them. However, this was not the most shocking thing. What truly shocked and horrified everyone was the appearance of these people. The appearance of the 4 grand elders of the Lu family. That's the grand patriarch of the Lu family, Alchemy Saint Lu. He actually appeared. It's the second patriarch, the king of life and death. He was invincible and terrifying enough to contend with the divine king of chaos in the past. He once suppressed the divine king of chaos for an entire era. Although he had failed in the end, his name had always existed among those pinnacle powerhouses. I didn't expect him to actually appear. It's the Grand Yen King. That's the 3rd patriarch of the Lu family. In the past, he single-handedly slaughtered thousands of alien deities and dyed the universe red. Now, many alien race existences tremble endlessly at the mention of his name. His slaughter in the past was much more terrifying than Lu Tao's. It's hard to imagine that such a peerless killing god would actually appear. The 4th patriarch of the Lu family, that mysterious existence, has actually appeared. The terrifying existence that could escape unscathed from the Divine King has actually appeared. Back then, the Divine King chased him across half the universe. In the end, he relied on his own strength to escape. To think that such a mysterious existence would appear here as well. The 4 grand patriarchs of the Lu family have all appeared. All of them have descended. What are they trying to do? Could it be that this time, they aren't here for the competition, but to seize the opportunity to exterminate Emperor Yu's bloodline? Although they knew that such a thought was incomparably laughable, these people couldn't help but say it. After all, everything that was happening before their eyes was too shocking and inconceivable. Such a lineup was still unfathomable in the current era. Even a peak overlord race without a supremacy would be horrified by this Lu family. 4 invincible, almighty existences. The power of the Lu family is enough to be called the number 1 under the supremacy. What exactly is the Lu family trying to do? In the void, similar guesses were constantly being made. Finally, a powerful and ancient aura was awakened within the Emperor planet. The peak experts of the Yu family have finally awakened. An expert from the Federation government sighed softly. He could feel that familiar aura. This was the aura of an invincible, almighty awakening. It was enough to make one tremble in fear. In an instant, more than 5,000 terrifying figures walked out from the Yu Emperor planet. When they saw the 500 figures, many existences were completely shocked. 5,000 figures, they were actually 5,000 gods. The Yu family actually had 5,000 gods as their foundation. This scene caused many existences to be horrified. An ordinary first-rate family would only have 300 to 500 gods. This is already considered not bad. But this time, the Yu clan directly displayed the strength of 5,000 heavenly deities. This is too terrifying. I'm afraid this is far from all that the Yu family has. Otherwise, how could they display it so openly? However, even with such a lineup and 5 times more gods than the Lu family, they still can't be compared to the Lu family in terms of aura. Because the peak experts are still lacking, there was only one invincible almighty that walked out from the Yu Emperor's bloodline. These 2 were the grand ancestors of the Yu family. Of course, many existences knew that although the number of grand elders in the Yu Emperor's bloodline couldn't be compared to the Lu family, there were still 2 of them. However, they didn't expect that only the grand ancestor of the Yu Emperor's bloodline would appear. The second grand ancestor didn't come out. However, when they remembered that this was the Emperor planet, they felt slightly relieved. On the Emperor planet, there was the endless foundation left behind by the former Emperor, the Divine King. With this foundation, the Yu Emperor's bloodline wouldn't be afraid of facing the Divine King head-on. Therefore, the appearance of an invincible almighty, the grand ancestor of the Yu family, was enough. This way, they wouldn't lose their status and wouldn't be seen as rude. It was a pity that the truth was as such. However, when they saw the 4 grand elders of the Lu family and only one invincible almighty from the Yu Emperor's bloodline, they still felt that the gap in strength was too big. After all, the gap between 4 invincible almighties and 1 invincible almighty was too big. This wasn't something that 5,000 gods could make up for. Moreover, because of the bloodline, the Yu family's existences of the same level couldn't be compared to the human king's bloodline. The grand ancestor of the Yu family and the Lu family's grand ancestor were on the same level in terms of cultivation. However, once the battle started, no matter how long the battle lasted, the Lu family's grand ancestor would definitely be the final victor. No one doubted this point. Although there were 5,000 gods, when these 5,000 gods faced the Lu family, they were still suppressed in terms of aura. The grand ancestor didn't speak. The same went for the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grand ancestors. This time, it was Lu Shun's time. As the head of the Lu family, he had been oppressed by the Yu Emperor's bloodline for a long time. It was time for him to show his prestige as the head of the number 1 family in the world. The same went for the Yu Emperor's bloodline. Although their grand ancestors were also the most respected figures, they were also existences that could decide everything. But this time, none of them made a sound. They all stood there quietly, waiting for the conversation between the patriarchs of their families. In the void, the 2 most powerful divine king families of the human race, the 2 most famous bloodlines that had left behind their orthodoxies in the past, met at this moment. The Yu Emperor has announced that we haven't seen each other for 100 years. I didn't expect that we wouldn't see each other for 100 years. The head of the Yu family fell silent for a moment. After a while, he revealed a look of nostalgia. In the past, you and I were high-spirited. We swore to walk to the peak of the extreme Tao and bring our families to the highest level. In the end, you and I both became the heads of our respective families. However, we still couldn't fulfill the promise we made in the past. Lu Shun also fell silent, who didn't have the same high-spirited and youthful arrogance as a child. All of a sudden, the words they said when they parted 100 years ago were still vivid in their mind. However, in the blink of an eye, 100 years had passed. At this moment, both of them sighed. It was an incomparable sigh. Chapter 521. Lu Shun, your strength has become even more terrifying. If you didn't want to become the head of the Lu family, but chose to cultivate wholeheartedly, I'm afraid it wouldn't take long for the Lu family to give birth to another ancestor. Only a virtual king who has stepped into the quasi-king realm can become a Grand Elder and be given the title of Grand Ancestor. Yu Yoguang's words undoubtedly meant that if Lu Shun wholeheartedly focused on the martial path, he could become a quasi-king in a very short time. A quasi-king with the bloodline of the Lu family is an invincible existence. Lu Shun gently waved his arm. My ambition isn't here in the first place. I know that if I focus on the martial path, the most I can do is give the Lu family another invincible ancestor. For the Lu family, this isn't much of an improvement. Therefore, I gave up on all that and became the head of the Lu family. Moreover, I feel that the time for me to realize my wish is already very, very close. After saying this, Lu Shun smiled. Yu Yoguang, on the other hand, was silent. You're talking about the Emperor, right? The taboo monarch. Indeed, with his existence, the revival of the Lu family is no longer a dream. However, after saying that, Yu suddenly stopped talking. Seeing this scene, Lu Shun's eyes flashed with a trace of fluctuation. However, he didn't ask. For a moment, the two of them were silent. After a long time, Lu Shun gently smiled. He looked at Yu Yoguang and slowly said, "This time, we came here according to our previous agreement. The battle will take place in the void of the universe. After all, the geniuses of the Yu Yoguang family must have the battle strength of a god." Yu Yoguang gently nodded. Indeed, if a god-level existence were to erupt on Emperor Planet, the damage would be too great. If they weren't careful, hundreds of millions of people would die. Countless people would be buried along with them. This is the ancestral planet of the Yu Yoguang family. It's a place that cannot be damaged. Therefore, it's best to set the battle in the endless void. Good. In that case, he would fulfill the promise he had made in the past in the void of the universe. These 100,000 deities are the witnesses of our battle. Is everything all right? Lu Shun nodded his head gently. There was nothing strange about it. At this time, the two patriarchs retreated, because they knew that what happened next was no longer their business. After the two family heads disappeared, two more figures appeared in their original positions. These two figures were even more terrifying, because they were the two grand ancestors of the Lu family and the Yu family. Yu and Lu Shun were existences of the same era. They were even good friends. However, unlike them, Pil Saint Lu and the Yu clan's grand ancestor weren't from the same era. The age of the Yu clan's grand ancestor was at least 1,000 years older than Pil Saint Lu. Unfortunately, the universe didn't care about your age, but your strength and status. In terms of strength, the Yu clan's grand ancestor was no longer a match for Pil Saint Lu. In terms of status, Pil Saint Lu was one of the 3 sacred path alchemists in the universe. As the grand ancestor of the Lu family, the Yu clan's grand ancestor couldn't be compared to him. Therefore, when they met, they had the most equal conversation. Looking at the Lu family's grand ancestor, the Yuyo clan's grand ancestor smiled and said, "Lu Tianya, you've come. I didn't expect you to take the promise from 10 years ago seriously and come here." Lu Tianyao was the name of the Lu family's grand ancestor. Hearing the words of the Yuyo clan's grand ancestor, the grand ancestor only smiled slightly, as if he didn't take it to heart. "Yes, I took it seriously. After all, some things are true, aren't they? Senior Lin Huang." The grand ancestor obviously emphasized the word senior. Looking at the two of them, the 100,000 deities in the void held their breaths. They knew that the conversation between the two was different from the conversation between the two patriarchs. No one was allowed to interrupt between them. Of course, it wasn't because the two of them were domineering. Therefore, the 100,000 gods were so silent because of their respect for Qin Wentian. They respected these two existences. The Lu family's grand ancestor, alchemy Saint Lu Tianya, was one of the 3 sacred path alchemy masters in the world. He was almost invincible below supremes. Rumor had it that he was on par with the number 1 human king below supremes, the Boundless King and the Holy Spirit King. If his identity as the Lu family's grand ancestor was added, then looking at the entire universe, he was almost the most respected person below supremes. The Yuyo clan's grand ancestor, Yuyo Lin Huang, was also a legend in his era. In that era, the number of geniuses of the human race withered. He became the target of ridicule for many races. However, with the appearance of Yuyo Lin Huang, everything completely changed. Vaguely, many existences still remembered Yuyo Lin Huang's peerless figure in those precious videos. One man and one punch, killing the younger generation of the human race to the point that billions of races no longer dared to humiliate the human race. This was Yuyo Lin Huang's contribution to the human race. These two people were incomparably noble existences, so when they were talking, no matter the reason, no one dared to interrupt or affect them. "Forget it, since you're serious, then we don't need to talk about anything else. You're already here." Yuyo Lin Huang sighed softly as if he was helpless. However, the grand ancestor knew that the Yuyo clan was actually looking forward to these days more than the Lu family. All these years, the Yuyo clan had always wanted to surpass the Lu family. However, no matter how hard they tried, they had always failed. And this time, it was the only and the best chance to do so. The grand ancestor understood that the current information about Lu Feng's strength was from 2 months ago, after the battle between Lu Feng and the Demon King. He had just reached the peak of the upheaval stage. In the peak of the upheaval stage, no matter how amazing Lu Feng was, even if the human king was reborn in his younger days, it was impossible for him to be so terrifying that he could easily kill a god-level existence. According to the information they had received, Yuyo Tongran had already entered level 2 demigod level. He was the king of massacre, and he could challenge all opponents beyond the 5 major classes. In other words, Yuyo Tongran's true strength was at least that of a high-level god level. A high-level god level against Lu Feng, who was comparable to a beginner-level god level, the result was self-evident. Let's settle everything first. We'll follow the agreement from the past. If we win, then we'll get a request. I wonder what the Yuyo Emperor's bloodline needs? In the Grand Ancestor's heart, Lu Feng could not fail. If Lu Feng was really only at the peak of the upheaval stage, then perhaps there was no need to go through with it. After all, no matter how powerful Lu Feng was, there was always a limit. However, it was different now, completely different. This was because Lu Feng was no longer the Lu Feng of the past. It had only been a month since the return of a perfect stage martial artist, and he had actually become a peak perfect stage martial artist. With Lu Feng's current terrifying strength as the Taboo King, his combat strength would reach the peak of god level. Even the Westland's Emperor Rong, who had god level strength, would definitely not be Lu Feng's match. Therefore, this was a battle that they would definitely win. Lin Huang smiled gently, waved his hand, and said, "Actually, this is just a competition. The stakes and whatnot don't matter at all." Indeed, to Lin Huang, the stakes and whatnot did not matter at all. Although the Yuyo Emperor's bloodline's ability was inferior to that of the human King Lu family, the Yuyo Emperor's bloodline had been through countless generations. However, their clan had also gone through countless years of inheritance. In terms of time, they were even older than the human King Lu clan. There were also countless divine items that the clan had accumulated. They did not care about anything at all. Of course, they still cared about some things. After all, those things were things that even the divine king cared about. However, Lin Huang also understood that it was completely unrealistic to expect the human King Lu family to take out those things as stake. Therefore, they no longer cared about anything. What Lin Huang really cared about was the name of the Feather Emperor's bloodline, Feather Emperor. It was the name of the younger generation of the Feather Emperor family defeating the younger generation of the human King Lu family. That was what they cared about the most. Hearing Lin Huang's words, the Grand Ancestor smiled gently and slowly shook his head. "Forget it, it's too early to say this now. In that case, let's set the rules here and let these 100,000 gods be witnesses to our agreement. The content is still according to the agreement of the past. The winner can ask the other party to fulfill one thing. Of course, this matter must not endanger the family's legacy. Apart from this bottom line, anything is fine." At this point, the Grand Ancestor paused slightly, and his expression became solemn. In fact, even those divine pills would be fine. At that moment, Lin Huang's facial expression changed for the worse. Divine pills. In the present world, only rank 9 medicinal pills could be called divine pills. As for a 9th-grade medicinal pill, any one of them was a true priceless treasure. Any rank 9 divine pill was enough to let a supreme divine king live for a lifetime, allowing them to return to their peak in their declining years. It could be said that the value of divine pills was hundreds and thousands of times more valuable than rank 9 divine items. In the present world, there was no longer any news of divine pills, and the only confirmed divine pill was in the Lu family of the human king. It was something that the human king had once killed a lone divine king when he was roaming the universe and finally seized it. However, the human king's talent was unparalleled. He did not need divine pills, but he had already surpassed all limits and ascended to a truly supreme realm. Therefore, the divine pill had always been left in the Lu family. The existence of the divine pill might be very attractive. However, everyone understood that since the human king dared to leave the divine pill in the family so openly, he was not afraid that this divine pill would be taken away by anyone. After all, the human King Lu family was still considered the #1 aristocratic family in the present era before the supreme of the alternate Tao emerged. Chapter 522. Looking at the Grand Ancestor, Lin Huang asked with some uncertainty, "Are you sure you're talking about divine pills?" Asking a question in return was undoubtedly extremely rude in the eyes of people of their cultivation realms. However, Lin Huang had to confirm it again, because he could not believe that what he heard was true. The Grand Ancestor smiled gently and nodded slowly. At this moment, Lin Huang fell silent. The 100,000 gods who were hidden in the void took in a deep breath of cold air. Their expressions were filled with incomparable shock. At their level, they naturally knew the significance of divine pills. Naturally, they understood what a bet of a divine pill represented. No one had thought that such a shocking bet would appear in a competition between the younger generation. One must know that even the bets between the peak Overlord clans that had lasted for countless years would not be so shocking. Lu Feng looked at the incomparably indifferent Grand Ancestor in the universe, and a strange look flashed through his eyes. This was extremely complicated, and it also reflected Lu Feng's inner thoughts. Even Lu Feng did not expect that the Grand Ancestor would actually take out such a bet. This was really terrifying. Slowly, all the complexity in his eyes disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by an incomparable determination. This time, no matter who it was, no matter who the opponent was, they could not stop him from reaching the peak. This battle, he must win, he must win. After a moment of silence, Feather Nether and Lin Huang agreed. He had already thought about it. None of the things in the Yuyo clan could compare to divine pills. Moreover, Lu Tianya had also said that this request would not endanger the foundation of the clan. Therefore, he had nothing to decline. He smiled gently and nodded slowly. In that case, then it's settled. When can the battle begin? The Grand Ancestor looked back at Lu Feng, but saw a gratifying scene. At this moment, Lu Feng did not seem to hear the Grand Ancestor's words. He did not feel any pressure at all. What the Grand Ancestor felt from Lu Feng's body was a shocking and vigorous battle intent. Lu Feng had already entered his peak state. He could fight at any time. Don't waste any more time. Now let's begin. Feather Nether's smile remained. He did not say anything and disappeared into the void in an instant. Wait, this was only a short wait. This was less than 10 minutes of waiting, but to everyone it felt like billions of years had passed. Finally, a terrifying and incomparably gorgeous space-time rift slowly appeared in the void of the universe. In the next moment, two figures slowly walked out of the crack. One of them was Lin Huang, who had disappeared earlier. As for the other, it was an extremely young existence. Just like that, the two of them walked out of the void step by step. There was not the slightest trace of smoke or fire, as if they were immortals who had transcended the mortal world. It made people feel incomparable reverence, giving birth to an aura of worship. Looking at that figure, Lu Feng's eyes shone with a resplendent light. This was an indescribable turbulence, an indescribable complexity. King. The young existence who followed Lin Huang from Feather Nether turned out to be king. In an instant, not only did Lu Feng see it, but the 100,000 gods in the entire universe all saw it. They all saw it. It's actually king. It's actually an era monster. The Feather Nether clan actually hid a king. Terrifying. How terrifying. Is the Feather Nether clan also going to revive in this era? King. That was a king. In the current universe, strictly speaking, they were the kings of the younger generation of the major clans. Only the emperor of the human race, the Heavenly Tao tribe's heavenly king, and the 31st prince of the serene blood tribe, the Blood King. These three were all monsters of the era. The immortal kings and demon kings were too mysterious to be calculated. As for Lu Feng's father, the Killer King, Lu Tao, his path to becoming a divine king was once destroyed and an accident occurred. Currently, no one knew his exact level. However, now another king had walked out. He walked out of the universe, the seventh king during the War of the Kings. This caused many existences to be astonished. As if feeling the shocked gazes of many existences, Lin Huang from Feather Nether smiled slightly with an indescribable pride. Since the Emperor Divine King, the Feather Nether clan was known as the second most powerful family of the human race. However, in the eyes of those pinnacle existences, the Feather Nether clan was nothing. Even among the 8 Divine King clans, they were only the third most powerful family. In addition to the human King Lu family, the mysterious Emperor Tai's bloodline, which had produced a divine king and a terrifying heavenly emperor, was the true second most powerful family. It could be said that the Feather Nether clan had suffered from countless doubts. Therefore, they had thought of every method and every possibility just to obtain the position that they truly belonged to. They could truly restore the supreme glory of the Feather Nether clan during the Emperor Divine King's era. Now, this era of the War of the Kings was their opportunity. In this battle, the younger generation will fight. His name is Feather Nether Glory. Feather Nether Glory. A lifetime of glory and splendor to myself. What a domineering existence! This name already explained the expectations of the Feather Nether clan. They wanted to revive and return to the ranks of the most powerful families in the universe. Everyone looked at Lu Feng quietly. These people's eyes were filled with a kind of sigh. Compared to Feather Nether glory, Lu Feng was undoubtedly much stronger in terms of aptitude. It was a pity that his current level was still too far away from that. Many existences had already seen that the king of the Feather Nether clan, Feather Nether glory, was definitely an existence above demigod. He was at least a demigod existence. Such strength was enough to be compared to a pinnacle god. There was the most fundamental gap between Lu Feng and him. Such a gap could never be bridged by talent. Lu Feng stood quietly on the spot. He looked at the other side of the void, at the glorious Feather Nether glory. Suddenly, a strange fluctuation flashed across his eyes. After a long time, Lu Feng smiled. It was a strange smile. Not bad. Although it's a little far-fetched, he can still be considered as a monstrous talent. Lu Feng's voice could not be concealed. Therefore, this time, everyone heard Lu Feng's words. Many existences looked over and stared blankly at Lu Feng. They did not understand why Lu Feng would say such a thing. In the perception of many existences, Wing's spirit glory was indeed a seventh-rank monstrous genius of the epoch of the era. But why did Lu Feng say that he could only be considered as a monstrous talent? Of course, these people were only puzzled by Lu Feng's words. They did not question it. Because Lu Feng was the king. He was the king among the monstrous talents of the epoch. He was the supreme king among the young kings. He was the taboo king. Therefore, Lu Feng's evaluation of the monstrous talents and geniuses was the truth and the theorem. If he said it out loud, then everything would be like this. This was truer than any other evaluation, and it was more believable than anything else. Feather Nether glory narrowed his eyes slightly. He looked at Lu Feng and smiled faintly in the end. You said that I could only be considered as a monstrous talent of the epoch. Then, how could I be considered barely? As a supreme king, every monstrous talent of the epoch was unquestionable. If the person who said this wasn't Lu Feng, the taboo king, who was even more terrifying than him, Feather Nether glory would have killed Lu Feng long ago. But even so, there was still anger in his heart. He was incomparably calm when he said these words. However, the anger hidden in his heart could be easily felt by anyone. In the void, countless people focused their attention on him. Lu Feng had long been used to this feeling. Back when he had fought with the Demon King, billions of martial artists had watched him. At that time, there had been at least a few 100,000 or even a few million divine beings. Even in such an occasion, Lu Feng did not have the slightest bit of abnormality. Now it was even more impossible. He shook his head with a smile and finally explained. The King of Massacre, who comprehended a type of supreme power, was a level 6 king path domain existence. The epic monstrous talent, on the other hand, was a peak level 7 king path domain existence. He was a supreme king who comprehended 2 types of supreme power. There's only one type of supreme power that you've truly comprehended on your own, right? At this moment, a slight fluctuation appeared in Yu Ronghua's eyes. Although it was extremely short, everyone could clearly see it. They understood that Lu Feng was right. The other type of supreme power was probably not comprehended by yourself. Therefore, although you, the epic monstrous talent, have comprehended 2 types of supreme power, strictly speaking, you are not a true epic monstrous talent. Lu Feng had seen this situation before. That was Yuhua Qing Yuan of the Yuhua family of the Sky Demon clan. He was a king of massacre, but the power of the dark demon in his body was not comprehended by himself. He seemed to have obtained it through some secret method. This was very similar to Feather Yu's current state. After a moment of silence, Feather Yu finally smiled. It was an extremely strange smile. That way, no one would be able to see his true thoughts. Everyone was silent. Today's matter was not something they could participate in. They were at most witnesses. Looking at Lu Feng, the laughter gradually stopped. Feather Yu Ronghua's expression became very strange at this moment. Not bad at all. As expected of the taboo monarch. You can actually see and feel all of this so clearly. He is indeed powerful, truly powerful. The expressions of the 100,000 gods were very strange. They knew that Feather Yu had already admitted to it. He admitted to everything Lu Feng said. In that case, he really had only comprehended one type of supreme power. The other type of supreme power had been obtained through some other method. You are right. I have only comprehended one type of supreme power. As for the other supreme power, which is my bloodline power, it was successfully condensed through a certain method. The two types of supreme powers I have are the Six Paths power and my bloodline power. Although I only have two types of supreme power and can't be compared to you, the Emperor, it is a pity that your strength is too weak. If possible, I'm afraid that even Dong Wang Lu Luo is more suitable for this battle than you. I am now a demigod. How can you be a match for me? At this moment, Feather Yu Ronghua was filled with an extremely confident smile. Chapter 523. He was full of confidence at this moment. A month ago, Lu Feng had just reached the peak of the upheaval stage through a terrifying collision. Now only a month had passed. Only a month had passed. This period of time was too short. He absolutely did not believe that Lu Feng's strength had increased to the demigod realm. Feather Yu Ronghua was confident that as long as Lu Feng did not enter the demigod realm, he would definitely not be his opponent. Feather Yu Ronghua was full of confidence. He stood quietly in the void, waiting for Lu Feng's challenge. However, he did not notice that in Lu Feng's eyes there was a strange and terrifying look. After a long time, Lu Feng smiled. He slowly raised his head, and his eyes were actually filled with a smile. No one understood what kind of expression Lu Feng had, or what kind of attitude he had. Some people were surprised. Could it be that after being praised a few times, Lu Feng did not know what was going on? It should not be, it should not be. With Lu Feng's talent and identity, with Lu Feng's existence as the Taboo King, how could he not know anything after being praised? But now, Lu Feng was indeed smiling. His eyes and the corners of his mouth were all smiles. It was a real smile. At this moment, everyone was full of doubts. Finally, Lu Feng seemed to have laughed enough. He slowly lowered his voice and looked in the direction of Feather Yu Ronghua. You're saying that your bloodline power was accidentally condensed, right? Feather Yu Ronghua did not know why Lu Feng asked this question. If it was someone else, he would only think that they also wanted to condense their bloodline. But for Lu Feng, he absolutely did not think so. Because it was universally recognized that Lu Feng's bloodline was the human king's bloodline. It was the strongest human king's bloodline in the history of the Lu family. His bloodline was a type of supreme power that was comparable to Crown Prince Heavendao's Yellow Springs power, as well as Yang Qi's power of the Six Paths. Therefore, it was impossible for Lu Feng to covet the method of condensing the bloodline because there was absolutely no need for him to do so. Although Feather Yu didn't know why Lu Feng had asked this, he still nodded his head gently. That's right, the power of my bloodline is supreme. It was condensed using a special method. Lu Feng nodded gently. That's right. The Divine King Monarch was only a peak temporal overlord. Although his bloodline was at the extreme Tao, it wasn't a supreme power. Therefore, his descendants couldn't possibly have a supreme bloodline inheritance. After all, even the Crown Prince of the Heavenly Tao doesn't possess such a bloodline power, let alone you. Although Feather Yu didn't like Lu Feng's words, he knew that Lu Feng was telling the truth. Compared to the crown prince of the heavenly Tao and the 31st prince of the serene blood tribe, who had appeared a month ago, he was a level lower than them. The crown prince of the heavenly Tao possessed two supreme powers, Wu Ling's power and the Yellow Spring's power. As for the power of his bloodline, it was extremely close. After all, Wu Ling's bloodline had given birth to 7 peerless divine kings. Among them, there was no lack of overlords of time at the same level as the divine king. As for the 31st prince of the serene blood tribe, his bloodline had been inherited from Heavenly Venerate Netherworld. Heavenly Venerate Netherworld had been a true overlord of an era. Compared to the divine king, he was on a completely different level. Therefore, Lu Feng's words weren't wrong. However, even so, Feather Yu Ronghua was still unhappy that Lu Feng had said this in front of everyone. However, Lu Feng didn't notice his attitude at all. He seemed to be thinking about something quietly. Nobody present understood what Lu Feng was doing or why he was asking these questions. Apart from the 4 great ancestors and the patriarch of the Lu family, they exchanged glances and saw the deep worry in each other's eyes. They had already heard Lu Feng mention this before. They already knew what Yuyo and Qingran were going through, plus what Yuyo Ronghua had just said. Now they understood completely. I hope Lu Feng doesn't go crazy and make things irreparable, they could only sigh deeply. From Lu Feng's crazy pleading and effort for Yuyo Qingran, it could be seen how important Yuyo Qingran was in Lu Feng's heart. Now, the person who was most important to him had become a tool for this person to condense his supreme power. This would definitely ignite the craziest flame in Lu Feng's heart. Hearing Lu Shun's words, the 4 old ancestors became silent. However, a moment later, the great ancestor smiled. It was an extremely domineering smile. As Alchemy Saint Lu, he was a psyche master. Coupled with his extraordinary status, the great ancestor Lu Tianya always had an incomparably benevolent face. He had never shown such a terrifying and domineering smile, but now, he was behaving like this. Irreparable? What is irreparable? Whatever the Emperor wants to do, he will do it. In the current universe, is there anything that the human monarch Lu family can't bear? The great ancestor's words awakened Lu Shun and shocked the other 3 great ancestors. At this moment, an unprecedented dazzling brilliance appeared in their eyes. Yes, what is irreparable? Their human monarch Lu family, in the current world, is there anything that can't be redeemed? Is there anything that can't be born? What are they afraid of? What are they afraid of? In the past, our Lu family was so domineering and majestic. When our ancestor was alive, our human monarch bloodline was the supreme royal family in the universe. Even if a branch family member appeared, they would still receive the most honorable treatment. The era of the human monarch has passed. Although we are still the number 1 family in the universe, how much of our former glory do we have left? Now, our Lu family has produced Lu Feng. Then, we must regain the belief of being invincible in the past. Because we are about to enter the era of the Emperor Lu family. The Emperor Lu family. The era of the Emperor Lu family. In an instant, even the second ancestor and many other existences who had lived for thousands of years felt their blood boiling. An incomparably fanatical look appeared in their eyes. As descendants of the Lu family, although they were the number 1 family in the universe, they still missed the era of the human monarch Lu family. That incomparable glory and splendor. The human monarch had already left and disappeared for 4,000 years. However, their Lu family had not declined, because they were about to enter the era of the Emperor Lu family. Get ready for a battle. No matter how big of a storm Lu Feng causes, our Lu family will bear it. The 4 ancestors laughed. The head of the Lu family, Lu Shun, also laughed. Their smiles were filled with a vigorous, fighting spirit. They were already prepared for a battle. Lu Feng looked at the feather spirit glory quietly without saying a word. However, this attitude made the many divine existences who were watching all of this feel that the situation was strange. Previously, Lu Feng was laughing, but at this moment, Lu Feng was silent. It was an extremely strange silence. Lu Feng no longer had that joking aura. At this moment, he was filled with an endless coldness. Feather Spirit Glory frowned slightly. Looking at Lu Feng's current appearance, he was truly puzzled. Previously, he had been smiling, but now, he was so cold. If he did not know that the person in front of him was the Emperor, he would even think that he was about to face a madman. However, this situation did not last long. At this moment, Lu Feng finally spoke. Finally, with that endless coldness, he slowly opened his mouth. So, the blood flowing in your body is not only your own, but also Feather Spirit Glory's blood. In an instant, not only Feather Spirit Glory, but even Feather Spirit Glory and Lin Huang in the distance were filled with shock. In the blink of an eye, Feather Spirit Glory and Lin Huang had already appeared beside Lu Feng. However, he could not get too close. This was because the moment he appeared beside Lu Feng, the Lu family's Grand Patriarch and Second Patriarch had also appeared. If it was just one of the Grand Patriarchs or Second Patriarchs, Feather Spirit Glory and Lin Huang were no match for them. When the two of them appeared together, Feather Spirit Glory could not get close to Lu Feng at all. There was a twisted look in his eyes. Feather Spirit Glory and Lin Huang did not say anything. However, Feather Spirit Glory, who was facing Lu Feng directly, still spoke. How did you know? His voice was extremely cold, as if it could freeze time and space, making people tremble. The 100,000 gods looked at each other and saw the slight turmoil in each other's eyes. They understood that this battle seemed to have changed their original intention. Looking at the Lu family's reaction, looking at Lu Feng's words, and looking at the Feather Spirit Glory's expression, they understood that there seemed to be a secret that they did not know about. Hearing Feather Spirit Glory's cold question, Lu Feng did not say anything. He nodded gently and looked at Feather Spirit Glory. After a long time, he finally spoke slowly. If that's the case, my guess is right. Feather Spirit Glory did not speak. He just looked at Lu Feng with an extremely cold gaze. They had become the genius of the New Age, and were known as the King of Young. Their existence itself was a symbol of glory. They would never deliberately lie or do something as shameless as that. Therefore, Feather Spirit Glory had undoubtedly admitted to it. She nodded her head gently. She really nodded her head lightly. Lu Feng turned around and looked in the direction of Emperor Planet. He walked slowly, and with each step, he covered a short distance. However, at this moment, the feeling that Lu Feng gave people was so indescribable and indescribable. However, after taking a few steps, Lu Feng finally came to a complete halt. Everyone, including the gods, could clearly see the sadness in Lu Feng's eyes. He quietly looked at Emperor Planet. His voice was so low but so clear. I remember that you loved flowers the most. You said that every time a flower bloomed it was a season. You said that you hated flowers the most because their decline was the passage of time, the end, flowers bloom and wilt. How many springs have you seen through, how many autumns have you seen through, how many years have you waited for, how many years have you waited? I remember now. I remember clearly. I've remembered every word that I've said. 10 years later, if I am still here. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.